All right, so it's going live. I'm going to mute both of our audios and start the timer.
Alrighty.
that off. All right, dropping down the volume.
Are we good?
We are good. Let me get the screen over. Welcome to Family Tabletop, or Tabletop Family. I always get it wrong. Today I have Dunder Moose. Let me change my screen over so you can see him as well. Let's see. There we go. All right, so I have us here over on the side, and I'm going to be shifting around the Discord screen a bit so that I can also have some stuff up on screen that we're talking with. Dunder Moose, I will share my screen so that you can see what we're talking about as we're going through this.
Right on.
First, please introduce yourself, however you'd like to be known. I know Dunder Moose is kind of like your name on YouTube and Twitter. So
yes. So I am Dunder Moose. I don't know what reputation I have. I know how I think of myself, and I think of myself as someone who's newer to this. I think of myself as a joiner, a Johnny-come-lately, but for whatever reason, I have been invited into some auspicious company, and I've been able to look around and learn from what other people are doing with the hobby. And so when I started my channel, I was just like, you know what? I'm not the smart guy. I'm not the guy that figured all this stuff out, but I know them. And I could probably get them to come on my channel and share it with other people that are on the outside like I was, looking in going, what on earth is going on in this whole scene anyway? So, yeah, that's me.
Crafty Matt has made mention of your mustache, and I do have to point out that is a rather radical mustache.
Well, thank you, sir. Not everybody in the Moose household is a fan. It may not last for much longer. The spousal veto occasionally comes down, but I do know that when I shave it, I get a lot of online bullying, mostly from R-dubs. But
well done. All right. So, initially, I messaged you on Twitter, and it was just an idea of like having you get together and we talk. I've really enjoyed connecting with people in the tabletop gaming,
right?
I don't know, community, space, hobby, whatever you want to call it, and getting to know them, especially because there are so many different ideas and opinions, and like I get the sense that there are tribes, like very, very staunch tribes. There's like some specificity to what we accept and what we don't accept, and so
yeah.
Before
the fighting is so intense because the stakes are so low.
Hey, that's a really good way to put it. No, that's a good point, right? Because we are talking about like games. It's like getting mad about video games and movies. Anyways, I had some questions that I came up with in a generic sense that I would just ask people, but someone on my Discord sent me a link to a couple of the documents that you have made on Drive-Thru-RPG, and that actually got me thinking more specifically things I would like to talk with you about, and mostly that's the BroSR, like the Brotherhood of Old School Renaissance, if I understand the acronym correctly. Am I getting that right?
I don't know. I think that sounds
right. Okay, yeah. Well, so I appreciate you sort of leveling with me that you're not like the authority on this thing. That's actually even more helpful. So I'm not speaking with like the author, but I'm speaking with a convert to some degree.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I can take you through my journey if you like.
You know what? If you could, yeah.
Version.
Yep. Tell me what it is about the TTRPGs that interest you, and what it is about like the BroSR that's kind of brought you in, and like why that thing.
All right. Okay. And let me just qualify it up front by saying this is my experience. And I am in no way trying to make anyone feel bad about what they enjoy in the hobby.
No. Right? Go ahead. Make some people feel bad. Like, okay, don't just sell me on it like it's your thing. Like, I'm asking because. So
I'm just going to share my lived experience.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. All right.
Go for it. Anyone can take that with a grain of salt or whatever. So, my first experience with the nerd games was the old school BattleTech 2nd edition back in the 90s. And that was way different than anything I'd played up to then. Like, think about Monopoly or Life or whatever.
Sure.
Here I'm envisioning myself as these giant robots stomping around, shooting each other with cannons and missiles and stuff. And but it wasn't really role playing, right? It was tactical. It was warfare. And this is the game that fired
Mm.
BattleTech for me and
Right.
my friends. The D6 Star
Yeah.
Wars West End games. We got this. We went to our local hobby shop, and I saw that. And well, I think a cousin of mine had played it and was like telling me about their experience. I think they played the first published adventure, Tatooine Manhunt, and I was like, I love the movies. I was like, I need to know more about this. You can
Mm.
play a game where you're actually in the world of the movies and like you get to have your own adventures and stuff. And we loved that.
What was
I
your
got
first adventure into that?
well, there's one published in the back of the rule book. It's an adventure to get your characters to join up. It's called Rebel Breakout.
Mm.
And it's just a quick little adventure where you guys join the rebellion on this station. And after that, the book has like a series, just like paragraph adventure starters. And so we did a
Mm.
bunch of those, and we were full into homebrewing our own. Like it didn't even make sense to us why you would buy a module at that point. You're like,
Mm.
we're making up our own adventures. We're having fun with this stuff, right?
Right.
Um, then Warhammer 40K fired Star Wars, and we were back to the tabletop wargaming. And then girls in college kind of fired all of it. I played a little bit of Axis and Allies in college, but by that point, I didn't even understand anymore why somebody would play a role playing game.
Mm.
Because in my mind, it was like, well, we were kids. We didn't have any agency. We didn't have any authority. You know, it was fun to pretend to be people with power and ability and stuff like that. And like once I got older and I could, you know, I had a job and I could buy stuff for myself and I could get my buddies together and travel to another city and do stuff. You know, like once you started becoming an adult, for me, the I don't know, the escapism or what, it just stopped working for me. And I don't know
Mm.
how to explain it other than that. Because there are people that I know that have like
What
played their whole lives
what age was
and
this
never
that this happened?
this is probably early 20s. This is when I'm in maybe late teens, early 20s. This is when I'm in college, and
Mhm.
yeah, just
Okay.
I was these games take a lot of time to play, so I
Sure.
was running around doing all kinds of things. I didn't have time to really, aside from the Axis and Allies groups in the dorm,
But there was like
um,
a disconnect where like at some point it sounds like you showed up to a game session and you were kind of checked out or something, or you just
yes,
or go ahead.
my buddy Andy that we always played with in the neighborhood, and my buddy Mike and I played, and he had a Star Wars session where I can't remember the name of the module, but like basically my character was a young noble, and I had a wizened bodyguard, and then I had kind of like a, I don't know what you call him, the guy that works behind the scenes to make things happen. And there was like this
Okay.
big diplomatic thing where a bunch of the nobles were on the same planet at the same time, and like crazy stuff was supposed to happen. Well, there was like this scene where like the big bad comes in and threatens and intimidates us, setting up the rest of the adventure. And I'm trying to get into it because I know my buddy Andy's prepped a lot, and my buddy Mike was just checked out. And so when the guy comes and starts bullying us, Mike just goes, "I'll shoot him in the head." And we rolled, and he got the shot off, and it killed the guy instantly. So the big bat just instantly gets vaporized in front of all of us, and we're like, "All right, well that was lame." And then we just
Oh,
kind of never looked back. Like
wow.
so, that was so a good long period where didn't play anything. Then, I got married, um, got family. I'm involved in my church, and we went up to visit my in-laws at their. They have a log home out in the woods, and we invited. My brother-in-law and his family came, and we invited a couple from church that had young boys. Well, mid-aged boys. They weren't young, and I just happened to find. One of these things they don't tell you before you get married is that like once you do get married and you move in together, both sets of parents will just dump all the crap that they've been holding on to of yours on
Mm.
both of you. So your house fills up quick. So I found these things again, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember having fun with these. And my buddy, I was like, I wonder if his sons would enjoy to play this. And so I brought the books. And when we were up there, there was no internet. It just out in the woods, just totally cut off. And I was like, "Hey, would you guys like playing this stuff?" And the kids had no interest whatsoever.
Mm.
But the dads were like, what's that? What is that, some kind of game? And I was like, well, you guys want to run the opening adventure, Rebel Breakout? And they're like, okay. And so we played it. We had a good time. Turns out my brother-in-law played Dungeons and Dragons when he was in high school and just loved it. Second edition, he had great memories. So there was a humble bundle, and I got Numenera, and we played that for a little while. And then that led into Dungeons and Dragons. And so we were, the fifth edition was the craze, and everyone was, the pandemic happened, and lockdowns and Stranger Things and Critical Role and all of that stuff. That was the default. So we started playing fifth edition. And this is where I got to throw out the caveats, because I don't want to yuck anybody else's yum when it comes to this stuff. But like, I was growing dissatisfied as a 5th edition dungeon master.
How come?
There was a lot on me to prep before we played.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get there and play, and like the players, they didn't check in until they sat down and we were starting to play. And some of them would be on their phone, and so part of it might have just been the way that I was doing it. I'm not saying I was a great dungeon master, but it really felt very much that they were only playing while we were together. And I wouldn't have put words to that. I wouldn't have had even the vocabulary to think of it that way until my later adventures. But it was like me doing a bunch of homework, getting ready. We had a fine session. It was fun. It was ho-hum. And then they all got to go home and think about other things. And then I had to start prepping for the next one, right? The other thing is, bunch of dads. We've all got jobs. We've all got, church responsibilities and stuff. So we didn't get together very often. And the way I was running it was, when we were not together, the game world shut off. We'd play, we'd pause.
Right.
We would try to pick back up where we left off.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But you weren't really, and it was almost like putting a board game away where you're not really doing anything. Yeah, I gotcha. I know what you mean.
But you don't have one of those tables where you can like put it, everything in the well and then take the pieces out. So it's like you get halfway through the, what was it? The Sunless Citadel.
Okay.
They got all the way through the kobold part, and they're about to start fighting their way into the goblin part. And then we called it for the night because it was late and everyone had to go. And then the next time we get together, one of the guys, well, and this is the other part of it, I was not making up my own adventures. I had a bunch of modules. I'd already, I got Curse of Strahd. And I remember feeling defeated as I read through it the first time. Like,
how come? I mean, Curse of Strahd's like one of the ones that even the people who are like, I'm gonna crap on D&D, they're still like, Curse of Strahd's one of the good ones. Like, what was it about Curse of Strahd that you didn't like?
For me, it was just knowing that we didn't meet very often and how much there was to it. I was like, it would take us 2 years to get through all this.
Oh,
right.
Okay. And what was the? How often were you guys meeting?
We would, so like the first one that I really remember running was it was an OSR module I got from a humble bundle, and it was a Christmas themed one. It was what was it, Orcus Claus.
Okay.
Right. And like, it's just a single module, and it took us like 3 sessions to get through.
Okay.
And we met like once every 1 or 2 months.
Oh,
so it wasn't like a consistent, okay, let's pick up where we were last week. It's like, okay, what was going on? What were we doing? Right. How many hit points did you have? That kind of thing, right? But so what I would try to do is I would get the next module, and then the only creative thing I did was kind of massage the transition from one to the next so that we could keep the same plucky group of heroes. The spotlight stayed on the same main characters. And I would kind of find ways to hook them from one to the next. And even running that one, I started them off in this like harbor town, and I had like 3 or 4 hooks that each led to a different published module that I'd read. So I was trying to give them, even at that point, I was trying to give them the autonomy to go where they wanted to do and pursue what they wanted to. But it was just a lot of work, and the pause timing was killing me. Because I got them partway through the Sunless Citadel, and we had to take a break. And then when we got back together, one of the guys couldn't make it, and the other guy that wasn't there the last time could. And so now I'm got to try and hand wave how people are either. So your options are, you get 2 options, right? Well, maybe there's more. One of them is like the Weekend at Bernie's, right? Like the guy just suddenly becomes nonverbal and just kind of stumps around behind the party like a moron. Um, Everybody's going to try to protect him because nobody wants him to die off stage, right? Nobody wants
Right.
him to get back together and be like, yeah, dude, we kind of screwed up, put your guy out front and he's dead.
Right.
So the DM's trying to run him while keeping all the other plates spinning, and that's not ideal. Then the other thing you can do is just like say, okay, well, in the night, there was a magic spell cast, and you got your body swapped with the other one, and now he's here to play. And everyone's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And then that's kind of what we did.
Sure.
So I think that's the better way, is just say, okay, yeah, he left and the other guy got here, and we keep going, right? You don't even have to explain it. I feel like a lot of times with these arguments, people make these calls to verisimilitude or believability, like you're writing a novel for an audience that's going to get mad and want their money back. And it's like, no, this is for us. We can just say, yeah, he left and the other guy got here, and keep going, right? But yeah, so the pause time was really awkward. I didn't like having to try and wave hands and figure out how one guy all of a sudden left and the other guy was, especially, and I didn't like how you would stop in the middle of the dungeon. I didn't understand why that was bad. It just didn't feel good.
And so, it seems it didn't work with your scheduling as well, because your players are coming back and trying to figure out what the heck they just killed and what they're supposed to be doing now. Okay.
Well, they didn't worry about it at all because I was there to remember it for them.
Okay. Right.
So I'm like trying to keep notes, and I think you've been dealing lately with some issues of DM burnout and like what to do if your players aren't as jazzed about it as you are, and like how does it still be worth it? So I was dealing with that stuff, and so and just realizing that most of the products that were coming out for 5th edition were these giant campaigns where it's like, it wasn't just like an adventure. It was like, we're going to start them at level 3 and they're going to be level 15 by the time you get out of it. Right. And I was like, nobody's going to want to do the same thing for that long. I know there's some that I think my favorite one when I was playing 5e regularly was the Yawning Portal, where it just has a bunch of smaller adventures inside. That was fun to take from.
Right.
But so I, in my own interest, started wandering over to the OSR. I was following a guy named Questing Beast on YouTube.
I know.
I was following a blog called 10-Foot Pole, Bryce Lynch. And these guys were basically reviewing these OSR modules that were coming out and saying, hey, here's where the magic is. Here's where the good stuff is. And there's some really awesome stuff coming out there, right? But the problem was I bought a yard of books and materials and PDFs and supplements, and I wasn't playing them. I had become a collector. I had become a consumer. And you always got the little excitement when someone gave it like, oh, so-and-so's ranked this the best. And you're like, oh, this will be so fun for my players. And then you get it. And then the next one's out the best. And so I got a bunch of those. I still... maybe it's sunk cost, but I still have like entertained thoughts. I'm gonna play some of these. The only one that I actually got to use was well, there was 2 of them. There's the Puzzle Dungeon and there was the Black Worm of Brandon's Raid that I got to run, and that was pretty fun for a while. I didn't run them in D&D. I ran them in Forbidden Lands. So I'm starting to get disillusioned with the OSR at this point because I feel like all I'm doing is just buying and I'm not playing. And then right about then this is like October of 2 years ago, I start seeing this hashtag on Twitter of hashtag BroSR. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny, play on words. The OSR, you got the BroSR. It's this, masculine group of gamers. And they had weightlifting memes and they had bodybuilder memes. And I wasn't quite sure what they were all about. And so I started looking into it. And
apprehensively or looking into it like did you go into it wanting to find the answer there, or was it like a cautious approach or something? How did it initially? Was that?
I thought it was funny. I was cracking up, and these guys seemed to be just absolutely having a blast, and I was curious about it. But then there was also a lot of people that were really against them. I don't know if you've noticed.
Okay, yes, and that's what I was gonna say. So tell me. So. Keep going. All right. You're probably going to answer my questions as you explain, but go ahead, keep going.
Okay. So, here's what I realized about myself as a player. I don't know if it's about me as a DM, but as a player, different players want different things. Some people just want to rank up their character and get mega powerful and stuff. Some people just want to have really crazy off the wall experiences. The thing that I want the most as a player of role playing games is I want to have crazy stories that when I get around other role playing people, when I tell them, like, it actually shocks them and they're like, I can't believe that happened at your table. That's like the thing I crave.
Hmm.
And
Can
that
you
wasn't coming
can you
from what I
tell
was
me
playing.
about one of those things as like a highlight, so I get a sense of what it is that you're looking for when you're playing, because that's going to help me understand what you're trying to create as a DM for your
Yeah.
players. Like, give me an
Yeah.
example.
So the example is what I saw coming from the BroSR. They had just launched something called Loft, right?
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So, and this is like a later thing that they had done after they had done 10 other impossible things before breakfast. But Loft was basically, they were looking at the old modules and they had the domains of dread, right? And it was kind of like the old Hammer Films monster movies. They had Strahd, who's kind of like Dracula over here in his own. And then they had a mummy in the different one. And like all of the monsters had their own pocket dimensions. And they're like, that is not the interesting way to play it.
Mm.
The interesting way to play it is to have them all in the same one. And the interesting way to play it is to have players in charge of each of the monsters and
Oh.
then see what happens when they all try to conquer the domains of dread.
Huh. Okay.
And so Strahd was assigned a player. The mummy was assigned a player. They were all, and if there wasn't one, you made up your own. And the players brought their own crazy gonzo ideas too. Like the guy that played Strahd, he decided to make him the Count from Sesame Street,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
Sure.
he's a Muppet.
Okay.
He may be the first BroSR Muppet. But
Does
he
does this
played him.
does this diminish the verisimilitude though? Like, is there some aspect of this like I can understand jumping into a Gonzo game and going, all right, we're gonna be nuts, but
Yeah.
you can really only run that high level of we're gonna be nuts for a number of sessions before it starts to get too zany for even the most zany players.
Dude, the stuff that happened was crazy. The guy that played the Count, though, he didn't play him comedically. He played him
Okay.
like he leaned into the tragic love lost.
Huh.
Like he played him serious and he played him heartbroken, and that just made it all the funnier
Hmm.
because he was a stinking Muppet, right? So that was hilarious.
Okay.
Um, they had what seemed to me at the time to be the holy grail in tabletop role playing games. They had mass combat. They
Hmm.
had troops moving against each other. They had a full-on war game. Whereas, the
Is,
joke is that
is that something
most.
that they play in real time, or like they really play it, or there's just like a few dice rolls to kind of hand wave things? How does that
Let me tell you the one that dropped my jaw. The elves all had I want to say griffins or hippogriffs. I think it was griffins. They were riding griffins, so they had these flying magical beasts, and it was just a squadron. It was just like a full force attacking this guy, and he was like, "I cast sleep on the elves," and the elf player was like, "Ha! Elves are immune to sleep." And he's like, "Yes, that's true, but your
Hmm.
mounts aren't." And so
Oh,
the elves just fell out of the sky. He just wiped out an entire force by putting their mounts to sleep. So that kind of stuff is funny.
yeah, that's
The
pretty.
mummy guy. Um, and the other thing that's happening this whole time is that they are viciously memeing each other on Twitter. So like, I bought his book too. I've got a. Let me grab it real quick. This is an actual artifact that came out of Brovenloft. This is the relics of the Kangsta. Kangsta was a Kangsta rapper. He was the
Yeah.
mummy. He was the rapping mummy, and he was dropping diss tracks on Twitter against all the other players. And so this little book comes out. Kursova published it, and it's got all the rhymes. And then at the end, it's also got his faction, like what forces he had and was able to brought to bear. So all of these guys were using first edition AD&D rules,
Mm-hmm.
and they had the forces that were delineated by the game,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all just playing these really high level characters. So they had high spells, high
Mm-hmm.
magic, they had a ton of clerics and all this kind of stuff. And this one poor DM is just trying to hold it all together. And when I started hearing the stories about that, like I still haven't heard all the stories from there. I had them on my show to talk about it. There was a road, and there was all these mummies, or no, I'm sorry, it was skeletons, and one of them just cast perpetual light on each skeleton and had them, march out. And so like it's like the whole street is lit all night because you just got like these skeletons standing there, inert, glowing. Stupid stuff, crazy stuff. The kind of stories that I crave. That I'm like, I want to be there for that kind of thing,
Right.
So, and that was just October for the bros. That was something they did during October.
This
the
is
stuff
a
that happened.
2022.
Yes. 23 or 23. It gets hazy.
So
They've
either
been doing
last
it for
year or
about
the year
4
before.
years now.
I know what you mean. Yeah, all the
It
days
was the
run
year
together.
before last year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I see these guys. They seem to be laughing their heads off. They're having crazy experiences that nobody else is having. And so I started interacting with them. And the place to go is Jeffro's Space Gaming blog. Jeffro Johnson is the one that started all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It started with him getting bullied on Twitter. There's a man named Mephrodis who bullied Jeffro into playing. He said, you got to play AD&D first edition, all the rules, even the ones that nobody followed.
Why? Like, I guess, okay.
I don't know.
So I guess my first thought is like, okay, why does anyone care? Okay.
Well, let me go back a little bit farther.
Go ahead, because
Let me go back a little bit.
Okay.
I got another book for you.
Hey, go for it.
I just keep pulling them out. So Jeffro writes this book a while back. It's Appendix N.
Mm-hmm.
He had been following on his blog. He'd been following all of the books that are mentioned. At the end of the DMG, there's Appendix N, and it's basically Gary saying these are the fantasy and science fiction books that inform this game for me. Like it's the genre that the game was designed to emulate. Tolkien's on there, but he is not top of the list. He's a minor influence. More like things like Conan, things like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
3 Hearts, 3 Lions. And so as Jeffro's reading the books on the list, he starts seeing where some of the pieces are coming from that made their way into the game. Like if any of you guys watching this are having trouble understanding how alignment is supposed to work, read 3 Hearts, 3 Lions by Poul Anderson, and you'll get it right away. And so he comes out with this book and he says, this is the secret to actually understanding Dungeons and Dragons and playing the real thing is you need to not just understand the rules of the game, but you need to steep yourself in the culture that produced it. You need to read these books that were written before 1980. There was a cultural shift in science fiction and fantasy and I mean, we don't need to get into the politics or whatever, but strong male characters and the strength of the gender roles. You started seeing gender swapped leads. You started seeing an erosion of what a man should do and what a woman should do. And like the older pulpy stuff leaned into what sold and it leaned into what people expect. And so, I don't want to get too controversial there, but I mean, it can go.
You might as well get controversial because just you saying that there is a distinction between these things, you've already crossed a line and people are coming for you. So,
yeah, well,
I mean, just by merely saying that there are differences between men and women is now a controversial take. And it's like, you might as well lean in.
The cool thing about being a tiny creator is like, if you cancel me, that's like what? It's a year's work. I'm going to lose my 12 people that watch, Okay. Yeah. But there is like, people say, why don't men read? And it's like, well, what's written for us anymore? So you go back and you find the stuff, the adventure stuff that was thrilling. And as you read it, you get a subtext in your brain of the kind of stuff that you can pull on when you're role playing. For example, in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, there is a witch that the main character comes across, and he doesn't know she's a witch. She just seems like a kindly old lady. and she offers to help him, and he asks a question she doesn't know the answer to, and she's like, well, let me just summon a wee sprite, and she calls up a demon to consult with. So like the idea of like minimizing what you're dealing with. And then I was playing Black Worm of Brandonsford, and there's a witch hut there, and my players went there, and I immediately knew the voice of the woman. I knew how she was going to act. I knew she was going to try everything to seem grandmotherly, and she was going to be dealing with some like high level demonic entities, right? So
yeah,
just by reading it,
yeah,
put stuff in there.
okay,
My current campaign that I was running for first edition with my local group, it was a lot of it was just based on The Face and the Frost by John Bellairs. The types of scenarios are just lying there waiting for you to pick up. And since most people haven't read this stuff, they're not going to know where you're coming from or going with it. You
right.
know, most people have just read Tolkien.
I see. So you basically have all this fresh material to bring into your
Yeah.
campaign that your players aren't going, I bet she's going to summon a demon right now. Like they're kind of
Yeah.
leaned in and then
you've got things that you can grab
Yeah,
and
okay.
totally steal and use for your own means, and it makes it easier to DM in the moment.
Okay.
Right. So Jeffro started with Appendix N, and that makes waves. And the other thing about Jeffro you got to understand is he is a hype man. He has amazing ideas, and he doesn't put them gently out into the world. He's like, this is the way you have to do it, or your game's not going to be any good. This is the way you have to do it, or you're not actually playing a D&D first edition, which he considers to be real D&D. So he'll say, if you don't do it this way, you're not playing real D&D. And that's where the people come up with their, I've been playing this for 40 years and I've never done it the way you say. And he's like, okay, well, you've been playing it around for 40 years, right? And people do not want to hear that. They do not.
Right.
You got two options when you're faced with such a statement. You either react in pride and say, here's what the game is, here's what I know, here's what it is, you're wrong. Or you react and get curious and you say, okay, you say you got a better way? Show me.
Right.
What you got. And the people that come in curious, I have seen again and again, not only do they become convinced by the play style, when they leave the table, they want to start their own version of it. They don't go back to conventional play. They want to play the BroSR way. So there's something to that. Even if you can't stand the way that the message is coming across, and that's the other thing is half the time they want to say that the bros invented this, and then they want to tear the legs under that and say, you didn't make this up, that's been in the game the whole time. But the question is, okay, if it's been there the whole time, why did we lose it? Where did it go? And there is value in someone who calls us back to return to the roots of the game. So what do I mean when I say the roots of the game? Well, Jeffro starts trying first edition, and there are some weird rules that either because the people that were playing it for 40 years were kids when they started learning. I mean, it's a complex system. It's like Mount Everest.
Give me an example of a weird rule.
All right, so one of the weird rules is that your experience doesn't come from the monsters that you kill. It doesn't come from the DM saying, okay, now you've reached enough plot points that I will allow you to level up. That your experience, part of it comes from the monsters you kill, and part of it comes from the treasure that you rescue from the monsters and bring back into society. So 1 gold piece equals 1 experience point.
Okay.
Right? So now you can go in and you don't have to just kill everything. If you can sneak around and find a way to steal their loot and get out, you may still be able to level up. Right?
Okay.
So that opens up more options, right? Like in 5th edition, I was playing, I wasn't the DM, my friend was DMing, and he was like, hey, there's a bunch of velociraptors over the next hill. Do you guys want to go mess with them? And I was like, just because I've been steeped in this new to me way of playing, I was like, they're not going to have any money. It's a bunch of lizards. Why would we go fight them? And like everyone else is like, well, those are bags of XP over there. And I'm like, oh, that's right. You guys, this is how you level up.
Right.
So you would just go fight a pack of velociraptors. In my mind, you're starting off with a dude with low hit points and crummy armor and stuff. I'm like, I'm not picking that fight. There's no upside,
Right.
So it changes how you think about it as a player. But that mindset is a hard one to start with. The first brick, the first step on the ziggurat of BroSR is rules as written. And rules as written specifically applied to AD&D First Edition, because that one has a ton of these subsystems that we shucked off, that we sloughed to the side, that we substituted our home rule for it. And it's like Chesterton's fence. If you don't know why it's there, you don't know what you lose when you move it. And so some of these rules may have been annoying. It may have required extra bookkeeping, but they might be load bearing. And the game that you get as a result may be a thin gruel of a diminution. What am I?
I understand. A winnowing.
Diminution.
Diminution. Okay. Yeah.
It's been reduced. It's been. It's a
copy of a copy of a copy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so, so like encumbrance rules. Nobody likes encumbrance, right? Well, if you got a pile of gold and you didn't think to buy sacks or a wagon, now you've got to figure out what you're going to take with you, because that's not just treasure, that's your XP. In 5th edition, I don't know what treasure's for. I really don't. What do you do with treasure in 5th edition?
I think you
buy magic
level
items
up your
when you get
bastion
to
or
town?
something now. I don't know. Or unless we're talking
Oh
about...
yeah, well, there's the bastions. Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't really read the new rules yet. But here's the thing. Here's another rule when you do 1st edition rules as written. Not only is gold pieces experience points, but if you find a magic item, if you use it before you sell it, you don't get near as many XP as if you sell it unused. If you sell it unused, then it's not really yours. You just discovered it and brought it back to society, and so you get a haul. So you're giving up something in the short term to try and level your guy up, or you may be like, you know what? No, this scroll, we're gonna need it in the next adventure. I'm not gonna. So it gives you interesting decisions to make. When you hit your level cap, when you get enough XP to level up, you don't. It's not like sparks just circle around your shoulders and rain down, and now you're level 2.
You have to train or something?
Yeah, you have to train. Okay. And so here's another weird old rule. You can't train yourself. You need to find a master. You need to find somebody that's a level above you or more to train you to get to the next level. Otherwise, it costs twice as much and takes twice as long.
Okay.
The other thing that'll make it cost more and take longer, which is really the same thing, is how well did you perform your role? Part of the duties of the game master are to watch how you play. And if you're supposed to be a thief and you're always charging to the front line with the fighters, you get points off for that.
Really?
If you're a magic user and you come back not having used any spells, right?
Okay.
Or if you're a fighter and you don't take the front, hold up your shield and protect the people behind you. If you're not playing according to your role, your class, and if you're not playing according to your alignment, you get dinged, and at the end of each adventure, you get graded. How well did you do? And when you've had enough adventures to level up, you look at your average grade over all of them, and if you get the top marks, if you were just like on point, played your role masterfully each time, it takes you 1 week to level up in training, if you have a master. If you're one level below that, it takes you 2 weeks. And each week costs 1,500 gold pieces per level that you're going to.
Okay.
Right? So 2 weeks becomes vastly more expensive than 1 week.
Right.
Right? So nobody gets anything for free. You got to haul your treasure out, and then you got to pay to level up. And then, so leveling up has worth and cost. And now, in 1st edition, there's monsters that can touch you and suck a level right out of you. A white that can level drain you, you do not have to, as a DM, I don't have to set the candles out and do spooky music and try and,
Right.
like when you know that if this thing touches you, it will suck you back down to level 2.
Okay.
That is terrifying to a
right.
player, right?
And
they have your attention.
What you've highlighted already is a system that pairs itself well with the one-to-one timing automatically.
Yes.
Because if you're playing in that game mode that you explained earlier, where you're playing with your friends and you pause in the middle of the kobold layer and you come back to it next month, you basically never level up, or you have to have like that kind of Final Fantasy leveling up where it comes with the music and all that, which is a very different game. And it's, you know, for the sake of verisimilitude, you've actually lost verisimilitude, being that your character leveled up in the middle of a kobold cave. So
Yeah, in the middle of a fight, all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I feel stronger."
Right. I'm good to go again. Yeah.
I just learned 2 new spells.
Yeah.
Right. So that was interesting, but you brought up one-to-one time, and that I think is one of the ones that really frustrates people the most.
Right.
Um,
Oh, I've seen a lot of vitriol for the idea of one-to-one time, to the point where I'm like, where's this coming from? Like, what do you care? I mean,
Yeah.
keep in mind, this vitriol is coming from the people who say there's no right way to play. You know, I mean, like,
That's right.
like, I mean, like, it's
That's
so
really weird.
It's so incongruent. I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. There's people going, there's no right way to play. But if you play the BroSR way and you play one-to-one time, you're probably a Nazi or something or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty intense, to the point where I was
Only a Nazi would play first edition raw.
Yes. That was actually one of the questions I had for you, was how do you feel about the idea there's no right way to play? You summarized it a bit at the beginning, where you were like, you didn't want to crap on anyone's. You didn't phrase it this way. You said something else. You said,
I didn't want to yuck someone's yum.
There
Is
you
how
go.
I put it. Yeah.
And
But I mean, some people's yum is actually yucky though, right? Like some
so
people.
No, go lean into it. Keep in mind, like, I am presenting this not aggressively opposed to you, but at the same time, I'm like, convince me.
Right.
And in some ways, I have actually been convinced. I haven't been necessarily convinced for AD&D. My family plays Dragonbane, but we are playing on one-to-one time. And I don't need to do it, but I was actually going to make a point to show you. I have on my Discord channel a private channel where my players are like, I do this, I do this, I do this. And I'm going, this happens, this happens, this happens. And we're engaged throughout the whole week, while players get to learn about the world and their characters in a way that we can't if we're only playing 3 to 4 hours once a week on Saturdays. But go ahead. So tell me.
So one-to-one time is probably the weirdest rule that came out of Jeff Rowe starting a game of first edition and trying to play with all of the rules, because it is counter to how we play. Normally we don't want our players to miss a second of what their characters do, right? And so you'll see, I have a video about this I did a while back, where I showed some Critical Role footage where they went to a shop and they were shopping, and like this one dude just had a long list, and everybody was rolling their eyes and getting fed up as he goes shopping. And I'm like, that is not what people want to go. If you've been working hard all week and you can't wait till Thursday night and your bros are coming over and you're gonna play, nobody wants to go shopping.
I want to go fight something, right? Yeah.
So and then the thing I said before about, like, when you pause that's like the biggest thing people bring up with one-to-one is, what if you need to end a session in the middle of a dungeon? What do you do? Because one-to-one time means you cannot leave those people down there.
Tell me, what do you do? Yeah.
Well, because there's another rule that says if you are in a dungeon, every so often you got to roll to see if there's a monster check. Right? And it happens according to the time.
Hang on, I lost your audio for a second. Say that again.
Oh,
go ahead.
I said that you have to roll for wandering monsters. It's meant to keep pressure on the players while they're. You still don't got me?
No, I got you. For some reason, it was going out. Here, try again.
Okay. Yeah, wandering monster checks in the dungeon. Every so often, a baddie comes by, so you can't make too much noise. You gotta kind of be quick. Like, you don't have all day to search for that secret door, right? You can't just take a long rest in the middle of the dungeon and get all your hit points and spell slots back, right? Well, if you're playing one-to-one time, and maybe we should just briefly define what that means if there's anybody that isn't privy to this rule.
No, please do. Yeah, flesh it out for me.
One-to-one means that when no play is happening, when you stop playing for the night, the calendar in the game world and the calendar in the real world pass at the same 1 day for 1 day time frame, right? So
now, when you're when you're in session, let's say your players want to go travel and it's going to take a day. Do you need to say that you guys started traveling on Thursday and now here we're playing on Friday? So you need to be like one-to-one with everything too. So if the players want to do something that's going to take a day, you go, well, you can't. We're playing right now, so you're in real time play.
Yeah.
Okay.
The example is like, let's say your team wants to go, they find out there's a cave full of orcs and they want to go plunder the first level. They just wipe out the first level, get all the treasure and come back. And you say, okay, well, it's a week outside of town is where this dungeon is. So they travel for a week. They spend a day. They do the first level of the dungeon. They get their winnings. They get out and they travel back to town with it. So that group is two weeks and a day out into the future. So you play that whole session. You play it out. You go into the future playing your game at the table.
I see.
But as soon as everyone leaves the table, the calendar jumps back. And now, if you want to play again next week, well, I kept track of it, and your guys are still in the middle of that adventure.
Oh, okay.
So we got to roll up some new characters. You're gonna start to have a stable of characters instead of just one mono party that dominates the spotlight, like American television or a movie series or something like that. Now we're gonna jump to other people, and the world becomes the main character. The spotlight flickers on the main characters and becomes what is going on in the situation in the world. And so now your new players, you just rolled up some level 1s, and there's a hook to go visit the wizard in the wizard tower, and the wizard's like, hey, listen, I got word that my buddies, the orcs, are about to get hit. I want you guys to lay an ambush for the jerks. They're going to get them. Wipe them out and bring all the treasure back to me. And now you got a decision to make. Because you know the jerks he's talking about is your other characters. Right?
Right.
But you're playing these guys now, and these guys have no idea who those guys are. And so
yeah.
You get into role playing.
You set your players up. Wow, that's fun. You set your players up to not metagame themselves and go, are we playing people? Interesting. Okay.
So can you see how that's a different approach that that never would have occurred had you stuck with conventional? And so it's like, I don't know, is that the best way? Is that the right way? That's not for me to say. I can say for me, that's more fascinating. For my tastes, I'm more interested in what happens when you can do that than the stuff I've already seen and done and played.
So what's wrong with saying that's the best way to play? I mean, I like.
Nothing's wrong with saying that's the best way to play.
Obviously, I'm going
logically,
good.
If there's more than one way, there's going to be ways that are not as good, and there's going to be ways that are more good.
Sure.
And so if you extrapolate that out, there may be if you define best as what, and this is the way Gary describes it, what creates the most interest for your players over the longest period of time. How do you keep them hooked? How do you keep them interested? And how do you keep it going? If you use those metrics, I think there are definitely certain ways to play that are better than others.
Right. I mean, that makes sense, because let's take a pairing of something diametrically opposed to what you're putting on offer. And that thing that's diametrically opposed is we're going to get together for a game, and sometimes we're going to roll the dice. And if we don't like what the dice says, we're going to just...
That was a dice?
Yeah, these are tiny. I keep these at my desk just so I can... You can't even see them yet. They're little tiny set.
Boogers.
I know. I got a real dice around here somewhere. But you roll the dice, and then instead of reading the dice and going, that's what happened, we go, why don't we just choose what happened? Like, sorry, I rolled a 1, but I actually wanted a 16. Diametrically opposed. Like, these are at opposite ends of some sort of role-playing spectrum. How do you feel about that way of playing?
I judge it.
I
feel smug. I feel smug and superior to that.
Tell me more.
It inflates my ego to think about how I play versus how people, and I wonder, how can you be satisfied with that? How can that still be fun for you and your players? So I apologize if that offends anyone, and if you feel like I am.
I'm not offended by that. I don't think there's anything you can say to offend me. I'm not that. I'm
talking to your audience too, right? Let me explain why I get such a human sinful reaction when I compare mentally the way that I feel is the best way to play with.
I like that you brought this.
You enjoy.
I like that you brought this to a theological standpoint. Go ahead.
Yeah. I feel like that way diminishes the accomplishments of your players.
Mm.
And it substitutes you as the daddy that is responsible for giving them a fun time.
Mm.
And the other side of that coin is if they didn't have a fun time, it's your fault because you didn't write enough, you didn't script enough, you didn't fudge enough
Right.
to make sure that they had fun. It's like getting bowling 300 with the bumpers up.
So you're
No one's gonna
saying
be impressed.
it's an arrogant way to play, like it's prideful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, it's not arrogant. It's not arrogant and prideful. It's there is a certain satisfaction as a DM when you have a session that drops the jaws of the players at the table. And you get more reward for the amount of work you put into it than what they did. Right? And that's how it should be, because it is a lot more work, especially doing it conventional way. So I don't want to diminish that or take away from that, but it seems like if I'm a player, if you fudge the dice for me so that I don't die.
Oh yeah, nothing matters. What does it matter?
Like, if I know that you did that, it bothers me.
Right.
If you fooled me and you got away with it, hey, congrats on your lie.
Right? No,
right?
It is.
But it sets it up to be this kind of like mama bird, baby bird, where you're just chewing up your chunk of worm fun, and I'm just sitting here with my mouth open, waiting for plot points to drop in, and it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't feel earned. Feels Mary Sue-ish.
Right. That's an interesting parallel to examine. It's like, would you want to know that you were playing as a Mary Sue? Would you want to be Rey Skywalker? You know, like,
that's right. Do you want to be Luke or do you want to be Rey?
Yeah.
Do you want to try hard and fall on your face a dozen times before you finally win?
Right.
Or do you want to just have everybody in the world tell you how awesome you already are?
Okay, hold on. So it's gonna take us on a side tangent, but I feel like it should come up. The BroSR has essentially positioned itself both in name and in more than theme. Let's say zeitgeist. Name and zeitgeist. Okay. It has positioned itself as a male sphere. Whether that's intentional or not, it is a thing. Like, I can see it, and I'm kind of like not even looking for it. Like, oh yeah, okay, so this is meant for dudes. Do you think that tabletop role-playing games should be a male space? As in, and let me preface it with something, let me give you a caveat. When women play this type of game, and obviously not all women, but when women play this type of game, is it more likely that they're going to do the fudging the dice thing? Like, do you see a difference between the sexes playing? Like, maybe I want to play with my girlfriends, and we're really just playing the game, so we're not talking about handbags and whatever else. We're not just gossiping. We're going to focus our attention on this sort of narrative game, and maybe we'll play dice. Like, do you see that, like, maybe there's a man-woman difference in play?
I can't. I'm not equipped to answer this. My wife does not play with me.
Okay.
I did a wife check meme a while back where she's like, but none of that stuff really happened, right? Like, you all just made it up. That's how she is about. Like, when I start telling the stories, she's just like, it just doesn't click for her. She's like, you're playing pretend.
She's like not interested at all.
Not in the slightest.
Really? Okay. Do you have kids?
I do.
Do your kids play with you?
My oldest daughter played, and my niece and my nephew played with me a couple times when I was more in the conventional style, and they've kind of outgrown it. My middle kid, Carson, and my youngest, they'll still play with me.
Okay.
So I haven't really observed too many females playing. I've got two that stand out, though.
Let's hear.
One of them is one of the best BroSR DMs I've ever seen or heard about, and she goes by Harmony Ginger.
I follow her on Twitter. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
She took the bro. So here's one of the interesting things that she did, though. She didn't ask to be invited in. She didn't say, I need your approval to do this. She was like, oh, here's what you're doing. And then she went and set up a Godstein. So she set up a Bronstein of the gods and gave each one of her players a god. They had to roll on a table, and they got 2 different aspects to combine. And then she said, create your world as the gods. And they ran this I think it was a couple sessions, maybe it was an ongoing thing, but anyway, they created this world together, and then they rolled up characters to play in it. And so she's got this campaign where it's just starting off the ground. Nobody has to read a published adventure and learn all the backstory, right? Nobody has to do a history book. Everybody was there for it from the beginning. And if the players go into a certain area, she can just hand off the DMing to the person who created that area with their god and say, all right, you're DM while we're here. So she's done it better than most. And she didn't ask for permission. She wasn't waiting to get let in. She was just like, oh, this is what you're doing. I'm going to do it. And she did it amazing. So I can't say, yeah, no, this is something that's only for men. I do feel like there needs to be a male space where you can hang out with your bros and be guys and do guy stuff. That I don't know. It's
I know.
I'm still wrestling with this because the other one I played. I got this game. What's it? Horde Wars. Right?
Okay.
I played this with DM Blackwall. I drove up to his place, and he hosted a game. And like the most BA character in that whole game was this dude's wife, and she was a paladin. We were attacking this castle. She's the only one that stayed on her horse. A bunch of zombies just rampaged through, and she kicked in the door to this this big mansion. And when she rode in, there were 3 vampires inside. Reaction check, 2 of them ran for it because it was daylight outside. Another one, he was this big chain vampire. He had a chain wrapped around his arm with hooks on the end, and he tried to hook her off of the horse. And she caught the chain, wrapped it around her pommel, rode the vampire out into the sunlight. He burst on fire, and then she started riding him through the zombies, trying to catch them on fire. And I was like, all right, this chick knows what she's doing, right?
Sure.
So I have seen examples of women that get it.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
So I'm not going to say, oh, this is just for men or just for girls. But
Sure.
I do think, and maybe women would back this up, there's a different dynamic when there's 1 girl in the game, and there may be even more of a different dynamic when there's 2. I certainly would not be the one to talk about that on your fine YouTube channel, but I will throw that out there and see if the females have experienced that, if it feels different having just 1, if it feels different having 2, what that does.
Sure.
So all that to say, I'm not mad at the bros for being bros. I think there needs to be male spaces where males can get together, and it seems like a lot of times when you have a male space and females start to come into it, first they want to get in, and then once they're there, they start wanting concessions made because we do have different sensibilities.
Sure.
Right? And then you are the jerk and the bully if you aren't willing to make those concessions. And over time, just by nature of our natures, it's going to change the way. Maybe it changes for the better or the worse. I don't know. I'm not there to say. I would play with a woman. I don't, I'm not picky about that kind of stuff. But I also understand guys that are like, no, let's just keep it to dudes here. Let's just keep it to us. I get that too. Good question, man.
I appreciate your light touch because I do understand that just asking the question, is there a different way that guys play from girls playing, comes up like I'm essentially asking you to speak about doctrinal issues. Like, hey, can we talk about the Nicene creeds right now? And like, it becomes this thing where it's like, whoa, careful. So I appreciate your light touch about that. But
well, here's the other thing. I may be wrong. I try to be humble and correctable and approachable. I'm going to say what I think, and I might be the idiot here. So, and if anybody wants to correct me, I'm open to hear it.
I think that's also a good stance to take. But at the same time, like, there's an aspect of the BroSR as an idea that has set itself as a thing, and for it to not be clear that it is that thing, it's a little squishy. Like, it's BroSR. Yeah. And I think the thing to do is actually to lean into it. Just like men's locker room, women's locker room. Once we just start saying locker room, it's like, okay, so do we want there to be men's locker rooms and women's locker rooms? Or is this not a big deal? Like, okay, let's... And I see a meme on Twitter on occasion, and it's tolerance is not a Christian virtue.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't like that, but I like that. You know, like that's one of those things where I'm like, dang it. And my son actually made a really good point last night. We were saying our bedtime prayers and getting ready for sleep, and he said, you know what? I think that the thing about tolerance is people confuse tolerance for patience. And I was like, ooh, you know? I was like, that's I think that's right. I think that's the issue, is that when we go, no, I'm not going to be tolerant of this, people misinterpret it and go, you're not being patient with someone in the whatever stage of life that they're in. And you know, when you talk about game spaces or communities, there is the idea that like this Warhammer space should probably just be for the people who really like rolling lots of dice and knowing lots of stupid numbers and armies. And if we're going to turn this Warhammer space into a totally different space that's more like My Little Pony, we probably shouldn't call it like we should probably maybe just make a different space. You know, I mean, like, like why?
Well,
why?
it's
good
to me. It's weird that the hobby is on the back foot culturally right now, because like growing up, it wasn't the jocks and the chads that were playing these games.
No. It was not cool.
Right.
It was like okay, I was a nerd.
This was a place where you could be safe. It was like the Losers Club from the movie It, right? The first movie. I don't know about the second one if that carries on, but like it's like a place where weirdos and like the kid that was good at math or thought something was super interesting that everyone else thought was weird. Like it was an acceptable place, and there have been women in Dungeons and Dragons from the beginning, right? So I think it's really weird that everyone's sharpening their knives to like, I mean, what else is even close? Is like it's like D&D, band, and theater. Like that's
okay.
Right?
I was a Star Trek and Star Wars nerd, and I considered these things nerdy. I was like, no, I'm not that kind of nerd. Like I'm not, you know, I'm not stupid. You know, when I finally started playing, I was like, oh, I didn't actually know what this was. You know, like I didn't, and the first time I got in a fight,
you got nerdified.
Oh yeah, the first time one of my characters died, I was like, I want to do it again. You know, it was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I touched an orb of annihilation and I lost a character, and I was like, all right, I want to make a new one. You know,
when we're kids, you know, you put on your pajamas and you fight the bad guys that you can't see in your living room, and then like that gets taken away from you unless you do martial arts, and then you can put on the pajamas and fight invisible people again, or unless you do Dungeons and Dragons or some kind of
LARPing or something. Yeah,
something. But so here's a story. Like I was playing BattleTech, and I had two buddies at church that were into it. But this might be junior high or maybe like freshman year of high school. And me and my buddy Mike, we played with this other dude, and we were talking to these two really cute girls right outside of the youth group right before we went in for the service. And they were talking to us, and we were talking to them, and everyone was smiling, and it was going well. And then Matt comes up and holds up his BattleTech miniature that he painted with just a look of like, can you even believe I have this and I did this? And we just looked at him in horror. And in the time it took for us to look at him and his miniature and look back, the girls had already turned around and walked away. We're like, what are you doing? Right? So there is a sense where your game can wreck somebody else's game.
It's a totally different era of time. I don't know what exactly happened in the zeitgeist. It's not just 2020, although that contributed. It's not just Stranger Things, but something happened that made all the kids show up to high school in pajamas. Right. And they're not like, and I'm like, dude, I cannot even imagine back in 96 going to high school and showing up in my pajamas. I would have been pantsed and thrown in a locker. Yeah. Like I would been like 10 different people would have taken my lunch. I'm like, I don't know what happened, but like, it's now okay to be nerdy, which means there's a new type of nerd. Right? Like nerdy is no longer nerdy anymore because all the people are playing Roblox and video games and these TTRPGs, and you got Critical Role coming on. I was gonna bring it up as a highlight, but I don't even know if it's worth it. I was scrolling through YouTube this morning, you know, getting ready for stuff, and I see D20 Dungeons and Drag Queens, and I was like, I shouldn't bring this up in our discussion today.
I mean, I think there's overlap with people pretending to be people that they're not, right?
but you get what I'm saying. Like we're talking about your you're presenting to me what you perceive as the best way to play the game, right? You wouldn't be doing it, like you wouldn't be wasting your time doing it the wrong way, right? You've gone through and through some process of your own experiences.
Let me qualify that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I got buddies that if they want to play, they want to play 5e and they want to play conventional.
Okay.
And if I want to hang with them, I will play that. And I'm not going to ruin it for them by telling them how bad it is, right? I may be thinking that in my head, that this is no fun or whatever, waste of time. But like, it's fun just to hang out with them.
Are they going to watch this and then find out that you secretly? Okay,
maybe.
Okay. But so if you're playing 5e, you just commit to playing 5e. You're going to do your best job.
Gonna play 5e, and it's like when your kid wants you to play the Lego Batman or whatever. And you'd rather be playing Arkham Knight, but you're like, you know what? We're gonna hang out and play Lego Batman.
Sure.
That's the Batman we're getting right now.
Sure.
Also, I haven't played all the styles. There's a couple guys that I couldn't stand at the beginning that I've really come to respect, called Black Lodge Games.
I see them.
And
I know them. Yeah.
The reason that I liked them, they were fighting a lot of the same battles that the BroSR were on the other side, right? Because they're all into.
What do you mean by the other side?
They are really into immersive role play.
Oh.
For them, the absolute height is when you are so invested in your character that the boundary kind of gets thin and you forget that you're not that player. Right? The kind of stuff that Civil War reenactors,
okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hit their moment.
Thank you for making that connection. Yeah. Okay.
You slip into it. And so the thing that we agree on, the BroSR and Black Lodge, is that there is a best way to game. They say it's this, we say it's the other thing, but the ankle biters that we're constantly dragged down with is there's no wrong way to play. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. And I'm just going to take everything I've bought and just hodgepodge the rules together. I like this rule for HP and I like this rule for that. And it's all okay because I'm the DM and I'm important enough that I just get to make that audible. I get to call it and y'all have to deal with it. So if you're going to play in my game, I'm going to slide you my sheet of house rules and you need to learn this. And then half the time I'm going to fudge the dice. So what you really need to learn, if you want to get better at my game, what you need to learn is how to read my mind and guess which things I'm going to reward and which things I'm going to punish.
Appease me. I'm a narcissist. Yeah.
Why do you want your players to get better at playing you? You should want them to get better at playing the game.
When you frame it that way, that's an antidote, a strange antidote. That's an interesting antidote.
Mother May I gaming.
Right.
I really dislike, I shouldn't say hate, I really dislike milestone XP. Because it's like when you've jumped through all my hoops, then I'll let you get a level.
Right. It's boring to some degree. Actually, no, I'd say it's really boring. When we first started 5th edition on a module, because first I started 5th edition back in like 2022, I don't know, a while ago, and we started just kind of like I was free-handing it, and I was just making stuff up. And then I was like, let me try and give myself some rails because so I started on the water dragon heist, whatever. And I was like, okay, pretty smallish book, not too big.
That is a huge module for the BroSR, but I'll let you continue and then I'll tell you how.
It was so bad, like because I started. No. Okay, I won't even take this. I won't even take the soft stick with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It is a piece of trash. The whole thing. I would play it. I would never DM it. I have so little respect for the system, the character building, the modules, the compendium, the company. I can see the company is coming in here hard and fast, just trying to make this thing a mobile game as fast as they can. You know, I'm like, they don't understand that they are sawing off the branch they're sitting on by doing this, but they're hard and fast doing it. Like whatever their committee of hive mind likeness is going, just get them to buy costumes. We'll make all our money back. And we're going through this stupid module, and at some point I came to I think it's chapter 3. Where they grab this MacGuffin stone, and then the game literally says, mind control the players, walk them to the space where it's supposed to exist in the world, erase their memory of it. And I was like, what the heck? Like, I'm not kidding. There's a chase scene in chapter 3.5 or whatever, where
Okay.
They're running after some kind of group of people. It's either the Kenku or humans or whatever, depending on what season you're playing. And if they ever kill the Kenku who's holding it, a new one appears out of nowhere, grabs it, and keeps running. And I was like, this is some BS. This sucks.
Unbeatable.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so they have no agency. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm totally off the rails. I have to make up my own stuff, but we're like 2 months vested in this. Yeah. And since I'm not like reading the whole thing because I can't memorize it, I'm just kind of going, okay, we're on chapter 2. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And then I'm like, well, now I'm in this. I have these 3 villains I got to deal with in this world. And then I'm just making stuff up as I go. And I'm like, this module's awful. And it doesn't even make sense. This is in a world where there's like 500 years of history. And in the beginning of the book, it's telling you like, here's the lore of the world. 500 years ago, all these gods,
You're like,
all these gods were knocked out of heaven by this one god, Ao. And like all these gods lost their power. And I'm going, this is a world where there are elves that live to be 1,000. So you're telling me the leader of this city is an elf that knows all the gods are fake? This is stupid. And I'm like, how do you come up with this derivative, nonsensical lore in a world where characters have 900-year lifespans? That doesn't even make any sense. And I cannot stand 5th edition. Like, and that is like coming from a person who got in at 5th edition.
Yeah.
So you are not going to offend me in any way by deriding 5th edition. I think it's trash.
I'm offended now.
Okay.
I like 5th edition. No, I'm just kidding. Well, here's what's interesting about that particular module is
you mentioned the BroSR likes it or something. Go ahead.
Well, it was one of the, so we had rules as written, we had 1-to-1 time, and then there was a guy named Chanticleer who was running 5th edition Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And as you know, that module has a bunch of mob bosses that can be in charge of the city, right?
Sure.
He decided to have them all active. I think in the game you have to pick which one you want. He decided, okay, they're all going. Okay.
I see so you guys created a Bronstein with the mob bosses.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so he said, I'm just gonna, I can't keep all that in my head. I'm gonna just, people that aren't in the game, I'm gonna ask them to run, and I'll just tell them what's going on, and then they tell me what their patron does. And when you add that element to it, that is the rocket fuel.
Interesting.
So he did that, and it went crazy, and the rails got obliterated because now the whole town is a living organism that has a gang war happening. Oh. And the players just can decide which patron they want to, and so like they go to one, and like the DM is responding how the guy would, but then if it gets too far, they'd be like, hang on a second, let me go ask the beholder what he would do. And then it's like, oh, there's a mind on the other end of this thing. And it takes it to another level, right? Yeah. So Jeffro had been playing Trollopulus, which is his 1st edition campaign that he started when Mefford bullied him. He said, all right, it's called Trollopulus. It's not based on trolls.
Okay. That's where my mind went. It was like the troll city or something. Yeah, okay.
Nope. Okay. Not trolls. Famously, in the back of the DMG, there's a city guide that will help you simulate the characters going through a large city. And there is a table called the Harlot table. And it's a table of all the different kinds of trollops and pimps and madams of the night that they can come across.
Red light district stuff. Yeah, okay.
So it's Trollopulus. It's trollops.
Okay.
I don't know. That might just go to the whole like male space. I don't know.
Sure.
I wouldn't have picked that, but I'm a big fan of the setting. So anyway, they had been having all these things where people would go to a place, there'd be like a big bad invested, there'd be, things going on. And then the players would, because they were maximizing player agency, they would lose interest and want to go somewhere else. And so there's like this thread that's just left hanging. And you do that for a while, and then Jeffro was like, all right, he saw what Chanticleer did with the patrons, and he's like, it's time to switch this game on. So he assigned patrons to all of those high, powerful NPCs and turned them all on at once. And like everything that had happened in the campaign up until that point suddenly became relevant again. All of the stuff that they started and didn't finish became something that now must be dealt with, not only by them, but by the others. And it it just completely flipped the table on the status quo that had been developing and turned the game into something else.
Mm.
And so this is early BroSR, and the whole time they're doing this stuff, they're fighting off the backbiters, they're fighting off. But so when you do 1-to-1 time, one of the things that happens is you can have open tables because you begin and end in town. When it's about 11 o'clock at night and everyone's starting to yawn,
Mm-hmm.
you just pack up your gear and you get out of the dungeon. Which you can do if the dungeon is just
Sure.
a space that exists that doesn't have a storyline or a ticking time bomb where they have to finish it, right?
Right.
You can say, all right, we got enough loot. Let's get back to town with it. Everybody can level up, and then we'll go back.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I like about that is that problem I was having, where if you end in the middle of the dungeon and then different people show up, how do you hand wave it? Well, if everyone starts and ends in town, then whoever shows up on game night, you can roll. You don't need to. And if anybody's like, no, I want to stay in the dungeon, it's like, well, you're going to run out of arrows, you're going to run out of spells, you're going to run out of hit points, you're going to die. Because if you stay there, you're still getting wandering monster checks. 1 in 6, you're going to get one, and sooner or later, you'll run out of resources. There are multiple tables. If they're all using 1-to-1 time, you can have Marvel versus DC crossover events.
Explain.
So what happened in Trellopolis was there was this they were talking to this guard, and I don't know, Jeffro was just, he didn't want him to, he was like, well, he didn't want the guard to give him what they were asking. And he's like, well, I'd have to check with the prince. And they're like, well, who's this prince? And who's this guard that he has the prince's ear? And Jeffro, because he's read Appendix N, he just reached for Elric of Melniboné, Michael Moorcock's series. And so he just describes this, the prince sits on a ruby throne. He's, pasty white, and he's supposedly really powerful at magic. And he became the new ruler of Trellopolis.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when he switched on the patrons and someone took over that guy, well, Elric has a sword called Stormbringer, which is actually, there's a demigod trapped inside the sword. And if it hits anybody, it doesn't just damage them, it sucks the soul out of their body. It's a very fearsome weapon. Well, one of the guys, Kursova, was running the cavemen. He basically just took out of the monster manual. He took the cavemen entry and just rolled up. Here's how many you have. Here's where they live. And he had his caveman faction. And he's on Twitter and he's doing the Grug memes, right? And everyone's cracking up laughing. So everybody wants to deal with him. Well, Elric was trying to travel there. He got lost on his wilderness search, and he wound up at the wrong cave. And he was talking to the wrong cavemen. And the guy who was playing Fluid, the druid, was hiding in the bushes. And the way that Jeffro plays, whatever the weather is at his house is during the session is what the weather is, so he doesn't have to roll it or keep track of it or whatever.
Yeah.
It was a thunderstorm. And so druids have call lightning. And so Elric comes up to the caveman, and he wanted to show that he wasn't a threat, so he drew Stormbringer and he laid it down on the grass. And that's when Fluid struck him with lightning and knocked him out. It didn't kill him, but it knocked him on his back. And then he tried to do some magic, and Fluid hit him with an insect swarm so that he was unable to cast any magic while the swarm was on him. And then the cave people just clubbed his head in and killed him.
Is this happening? Is this like a thing that's happening in real time, like where people are responding to each other?
Yeah, this is a session.
Okay.
This is a session.
I got you. Okay.
So Fluid grabs the sword and puts it on his dog Petunia and has him run it back to his druid lair in the middle of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of crazy stuff happened with the sword. It was wrecking everything. And when the good guys got a hold of it, they were like, we are going to get rid of this sword. Just get it out of Trellopolis.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them had an idea and said, you know what? How about we send it into B-Dub's campaign? He was running Dub's own. He had been a player in first edition Trellopolis, and then he had left to start his own BroSR campaign. And he was using Axe, the Adventure Conqueror King system.
Okay.
So he was running Dub's Zeron, but they were both using 1-to-1 time. So it was the same date in both tables. So some of the players were in both campaigns were like, hey, guess what? Stormbringer just came into your game. And then everyone there was fighting over it. One of the characters had an astronaut character, and or one of the players had an astronaut character. He grabbed the sword and flew up in his spaceship, and he said, I'm just going to end this right now, and I'm going to throw it into the sun. So he throws it. And then someone in the Dubs-Ruin campaign is like, hang on a second, the sun isn't just the sun in this world. It's Aminar. He's the god of light and good. What happens if a god of light and good gets hit with a soul-sucking sword that could rip his soul out? Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the guy that threw the sword was an astrophysicist, and he figured out the orbital decay. And he said, all right, this is when I let the sword go. And by my calculations, on September whatever, the sword is going to hit the sun. And by this point, multiple tables are getting pulled into this. And so they're saying, okay, well, the sun's not just going to take the hit. He's going to try and stop it from coming in because he is also a god.
Mm-hmm.
But the evil beings are going to try to make sure that it does hit him.
Mm.
And so the idea was, if the sword hits the sun, every campaign that's interlocked right now, the evil guys will get a bonus and the good guys will get nerfed.
Mm.
And if they do capture the sword, they were going to shunt it into Brovenloft before that started, right? So you've got people saying, all right, well, I've got this many clerics and they're going to spend this much money in donations and they're going to spend this many weeks praying. And it's like, okay, well, if you do that, then you get this many star giants per round. And they sent it to a guy named Mr. Wargaming. He's got a YouTube channel. You guys should all check it out.
I've seen him. Yeah.
The Joy of Wargaming.
Yeah.
So go on his channel and search for the Saga of Stormbringer.
Okay.
Because he did a miniature battle he just filmed a different turn and released it each night. Everyone was watching on the edge of their seat. Is this sword gonna make it? Or are the good guys gonna win or are the bad guys gonna win? And I'm not gonna spoil what happened for you, but like this kind of crazy multi-table crossover event is only possible if everyone's committed to 1-to-1 time.
Mm.
Now, the first time you saw that, you read 1-to-1 time, you're like, oh, that sounds like a hassle. That's not fun. Nobody had any idea that they were just crossing off the table one of the craziest things that's ever happened in gaming. And yet, that's what following these weird little rules leads to, that you didn't even know. We didn't even know we lost it as a hobby until Jeff Rowe hit the hornet's nest and started saying, no, we're not gonna fudge the dice. We're not gonna home brew it. I mean, we're not perfect. We don't always get the rules right, and we don't always understand what they mean because it is tough, and we're trying to recreate it. But rules as written leads you to the stuff that was forgotten. The stuff that was forgotten leads you to 1-to-1 time. 1-to-1 time leads you to a way that the Bronstein play can make sense, not just at your table, but at multiple tables. And you can have some like just mythic stuff go down. And you, at the end of the day, I can go to the water cooler at work and talk to the other nerds there and say, let me tell you what happened in Trolopulus last night. Right?
Sure. Let's see. There's multiple levels to the thing you've just described. And in some ways, it does remind me of a ye old time, right? Like video games used to be something like what you're talking about when you and your 4 or 5 friends who owned an Xbox would get together, land the things up together. Well, not just couch co-op, but where you want to play Halo with 16 players all in the same space. This is before Halo 2 came out and just ruined everything. But you guys were there playing Blood Gulch, driving scorpions up on top of bases, doing crazy stuff. But
breaking circuit breakers in the house.
Yeah. And then every time you finished a match, you guys were calling each other names during the match, but it was like pause, let's have a pizza, let's talk about that crazy thing where you guys flipped the warthog over the ghost when you're describing something that to me feels adjacent to that I don't think exists at all in the Critical Role space. I think there's an inundation of like it's just endless meaninglessness within like a lot of these so many different systems, so many different campaigns, so many different we're just like at some point when we're making some of these games, but we're doing it for the point of observation from the outside, it distorts the thing. And I don't get the sense that you're describing something that is essentially viewed that way. Like it's not being done for the sake of being viewed, it's being done for the sake of itself. And I think taking the character individuality out of it and building it around a world exemplifies the potential for that to be a good character driven story, as opposed to I'm not sure how to contrast that, but I'm seeing the thing you're saying, and it's very interesting. And I want to ask you a question about this in contrast to something else.
Okay.
How do you feel about the tabletop RPG future? Because looking at the metrics of things, I see the channels like the Joy of Wargaming, your channel, larger ones like the Black Lodge Fellows, but just compared to the monolith that is tabletop RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I mean, now it's, what is it, 6th edition or something? Compared to the parade, like, what do you think of the future of tabletop RPGs? And like, I have some sense of what I think you think based on the fact that you've made a YouTube channel and you've directed it at something that is not like success driven. You know, like, you could definitely chase Dungeons and Dragons, and you could make a Jenny D channel or whatever. I mean, you'd have to be a lot prettier, but you know, you could aim in the direction.
I'd have to dye my eyebrows and my mustache.
Go. Yes, green dyed mustache. Hey, your wife might go for it, right?
Who knows? She might let me keep it. Yeah, I don't think so.
I've laid out essentially what I'm trying to get you to push into. Give me your thoughts.
So yeah, I've got friends that ask me, okay, what is the BroSR really, and like, how big of a splash are you guys? And here's how I describe it: like, the OSR and the BroSR clash. The OSR is way bigger. The 5e guys aren't even aware of it, right? Like, the 5e is a whale, the OSR is a lamprey on the whale, and like the BroSR guys are like some little barnacle irritating the lamprey, right? So
that's a good point.
My feelings on it are largely informed by a guy named Bradford Walker, and he has a blog that you should check out if you haven't already. It's he talks about the clubhouse, the mentality that, like, there used to be these wargaming clubhouses where there was a ton of dudes. They'd come over and play war games in someone's basement or whatever. They had a library of books that they were all borrowing and reading and playing, and they were playing the games, and they were all about the hobby. And I think if you look at the history of TSR, you know, Camelot didn't last very long. Once money got involved, it wrecked it. And I feel like that's kind of what happens. Like, the BroSR, they came out with their own Bronstein product called BroSR, and they released it for free online. And you can buy it on Amazon, and you'll get it at cost, whatever it costs to print it and ship it. So that's one path. I don't think many are going to take it, but the ones that do are passionate, and they're going to have good gaming, and they don't care about online. They don't care about market share or taking over. They are just having a blast with the people that want to do what they're doing with them. I think there's no doubt that Hasbro and WotC, like, they need to adapt. You know, when I talked about this recently on my channel, but like, when the Karate Kid movie came out, all of the dojos in America felt like they were marketing geniuses because everybody was coming to play, right? And then it faded because not everybody has got the long-term interest in martial arts. And I feel like with the zeitgeist of Stranger Things and Critical Role and Pandemic, it hit a ramp. It got huge. But I feel like the people that their livelihood is based on predicting how to make money from that,
right?
They are acting in their best financial interest in saying, we need to go more of a microtransaction video game route. 5th edition, because of the reasons we've been talking about, it's hard on DMs. There's a DM crisis. There's a shortage. And the more you can offload that to AI or a system, you know, like, if my guys, I feel like a lot of it comes down to D&D Beyond. How many people can't really even play 5th edition, right? Like, they can run their D&D Beyond character from the website.
Interesting. As in, like, they would have trouble making their own character going through the book.
If you hand them the books and a sheet of lined notebook paper and a pencil, they'd be like, right? I also feel like 5th edition, the last agency you really get is when you do a character build and you write their backstory. and you hope that the DM will fold that into the ongoing story. The reason they sweat so much about backstory, the reason they sweat so much about character build is because after that moment, it's not really up to them what's going to happen. They just have to walk through the amusement park and react to the rides.
Right.
So sorry if that's really coming across harsh. This is how I see it.
I think the backstory section in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is stupid. It doesn't. You go to this section of the book, and really what players are doing is adding a metagame aspect to the character. It's like you're not going, was I a soldier or a pirate or a mariner or whatever? You're going, I would like this language plus this tinkerer's kit plus this bonus to this skill.
Yeah.
And you even have like a whole channel is dedicated to this. I mean, Dungeon Dudes, I think, is a channel that became famous because they're teaching people how to game the system. Like, hey, you want to make a character that has a 26 in all their skills? Like, you want to never have to even roll, like, and you can do that using their system. And
there is fun in that. That's like BattleTech, like making your own mechs instead of just using the pre-rolled ones. So I'm not taking anything away from that.
But it doesn't feel like a TTRPG. It feels like, if you look
at the appendix N for 5th edition, I got it from the library.
Yeah.
If you look at theirs is appendix D. Inspiration, you get titles like Stephen King on writing, a memoir of the craft. You get titles like Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. So you get like books on how to write novels, books on how to write screenplays. You get some stuff about castles, I guess. John Truby, The Anatomy of Story. You don't have this. You have the stuff that tells you how to make stories. You don't have the stuff that says, here's amazing stories to fill up your subconscious with that you can, that will actually be tools when you're in the moment.
Right. That's a big difference. That is categorically different.
So the people that are playing 5th edition, are they playing wrong? Well, I don't think they're playing 5th edition wrong. I think they're playing it the way that it's meant to be played. I just think that it's a different game than D&D. I think OD&D is real D&D. I think 1st edition is real D&D, but like the more of the creators that you eject, the less D&D it is. And when you get to the time when Gary's gone and Dave is gone, which is halfway through 1st edition, I mean, Gary was still there for a while during 1st, but he was in Hollywood trying to make cartoons and stuff, right? I think the farther you get from the source, the more you get people that are looking at the bottom line and not the people that are in love with the hobby. And I'm not trying to say people that worked for those companies during that time weren't fans and weren't doing their best. They were, but it's just not got the same goals. If you play 1st edition by the rules, all you need is the 3 books: Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DMG. You'll never need to buy another module. Well, that's great for the hobby. That's terrible for
business,
for making a buck.
Right. You
to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think that the BroSR is going to continue making their own stuff, just player generated content for each other. I think that the monolith is going to move into digital, and I feel like the poor OSR guys are the ones that have one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat, and they're going to get dropped in the drink. Because they've always been just like the dogs eating the scraps from the 5th E table that fall off.
Right.
And when 5th E, you saw the OGL, that terrified everybody because they saw the gravy train ending where it's like, well, now you're going to have to pay all this extra if you use this license. And so I don't know. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope everything thrives and continues and grows. But from what I'm seeing, and I saw a tweet, oh man, who was the one that said it? They said that the reason that Dungeons and Dragons fell off is the same reason that KB Toys isn't a thing anymore. Because we're just not having as many children. There's no kids around to buy this stuff and get into it.
Dude, that's dark.
It wasn't my original thought, so I don't want to say that I stole that, but I will say I stole that.
So
but it's like it
dark,
has the ring of truth, doesn't it?
No. Toy Story. No. Toys R Us. Same. Right. When you said it, I was like, oh, dude, that's dystopian. That's like some Children of Men thing. Like, no, it's no. Okay,
Yeah, we
so
can't let it end there. Let's
no, no,
think of
no, no,
something
no. Well,
uplifting
no,
quick.
that's my thought. Is like that's kind of the point of the thing you're doing, and that's kind of the point of the thing I'm doing. Like when I first got into making YouTube videos, on like beginning of
Hmm.
summer or something like that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and focus on war games, like specifically war games, because like
Yeah.
my son and I, we really liked it. We're hitting it off. We're connecting through them, and there's a part of me that feels like there's an essential aspect to them when you're trying to compete with video games. I don't think the RPGs do it nearly as well. And so, as much as I want to lean in and go, yeah, RPGs totally, that only came about more recently when I was like, oh, actually, we were having like a family game night. It started off with like
Yeah.
Zombicide and Star Wars Imperial Assault, and we were having a good time.
Okay.
But at some
Yeah.
point, our game group started getting a little bigger, and we started going like, well, we kind of want to jump on the stormtrooper's head and do weird stuff. So we moved into D&D. I think the tabletop RPGs are essential to get kids from Roblox to something else. But I
Yeah.
also think that the war games are an adjacency. Like you can't have a tabletop RPG like 3 or 4 times a week, and you might want to have a connection thing with your kids and your family a few times a week. I think it's good to have both of them as an interest. Like you pick a
Yeah.
war game, and you mentioned like the BroSR doing that type of thing where you guys are taking the elves versus the zombies or whatever and the mummies. And I'm like, that's incredible fun. Like that sounds
Yeah.
very interesting and something that like kids could totally get behind. But that's the hope. You find the thing, because once a kid who plays Roblox gets a chance to play Mouse Ritter,
Hmm.
Roblox tastes different. Like that's a different
Yeah.
thing, because
Yeah.
you give them real attention, right? That thing where you're sitting next to them watching the Roblox game, it's empty, it's meaningless. But
Yeah.
when you
They won't
allow
remember
them,
it.
when you allow them to, stab a scorpion in its venom sac and then use that poison knife to kill a rat, like you've given
Yeah.
them something that they're going to work with, and it's like you then buffer that with some sort of adjacent war game to give them that
Yeah.
crunchy thing that they're looking for from RPGs, and that's where I'm like, okay, that's now my mission, right? And
Yeah.
someone like you is because when Crafty Matt first started yelling in my comments to me, like, you got to try one time, you got to try Bronstein, I was like, shut
Yeah.
up. Like, and I was like, okay,
Dude, you know what is so funny about that?
what's that? Yeah.
He did not like the bros at the beginning. He was one
Really?
of our biggest he wasn't an enemy, but he took a while to come around to it, and he is good
Really?
at making his case, and he was letting us have it for a while there.
Sure.
But he's a big read the manual guy. He's a
Hmm.
big don't be a scrub, like Serlin's oh shoot, what's the name of that book? I'll remember it later. It's
Yeah.
mainly for fighting arcade games, but
Okay. Oh yeah, because he comes from
he
like
like
Tekken and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So he came around and he was like, you know what? No, I gave it a shot, and these guys are right, and this is better.
Hmm.
And so he's like a bro now.
Sure.
But he a lot of us have that story where we started off by fighting with the bros and then like
Right.
came around. So
Right. No, I
so
did.
he was bugging you about it, huh?
Well, I did myself when because there are things that people, I'd complain about something on a video. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this, right? And I go and read all the comments and try to. Sometimes they get a little heady and like there's pages, but I read all the
Yeah.
comments and I try and go into, okay, I'm like, all right, what is this person trying to tell me? What can I learn from this? And there was a few people who are going, try one timing, try West March's campaign.
Yep.
And there were aspects where I'm like, no. And then I finally went, all right, let's try this one timing. And it fixed a lot of our issues. Like it fixed a lot
Yeah.
of the things where, for example, we'd have a session that was just shopping, like you mentioned on Critical Role. And I'm like, oh, dude, like that bummed me out when we had a session and people just wanted to buy wagons and then cornmeal and like it wasn't even like
And
interesting.
they wanted you to do the voice for the quirky
Yeah,
shopkeeper, right?
right. And I'm like, or when I failed to do the voices for all the different shopkeepers and I hand wave stuff, we had dead sessions because I didn't run NPCs well. And some of that was because like, it's just not interesting to run a specific, I'm like, but when we come back to our session, so like, I actually wanted to ask you what you think of some more of the modern TTRPGs, but let me finish the thought. We're playing
Okay.
in Dragonbane, which I would consider light modern since it is an older system that's kind of been like re-upped with like a version 2
Yeah.
or whatever. But But that campaign that they have has a lot of interesting NPCs that are fun to run, but it's more fun to do the one-to-one timing with them and then have my players come back to them as like regular characters, almost like a sitcom or something, you know, like they
Yeah.
come back and, oh, here's what Badendor says, here's what so-and-so, oh, called, hits you on the back of the shoulder and says, get out of here. Like, that's fun in the one-to-one timing, because the majority of our session that we're having on Saturday night is actually go off on an adventure, come back, build up the town. The town has been
Yes.
building up, and then my players get to see the stuff that they did in real time affect the stuff that they're doing in the one-to-one time, and then the stuff they're doing one-to-one time affects. And at some point, they're going off on an adventure, and some kid goes waving like, "Hey, you know, tell me about what you did next week so I can draw it up on my murals." And like, it's so much fun that I'm like, I don't know why I wasn't doing this. Why isn't Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition teaching people to do this? Because this downtime, this arbitrary thing, you guys are basically arguing for the same thing as one-to-one time, but you're ridiculing me for saying one-to-one time is better. You know, it's like you guys understand that downtime is just arbitrary one-to-one time. You know, I mean, it's like you're arguing for a less clear thing. You want no boundaries, and that doesn't make any sense. It's the same people who are saying, when we roll this thing, we just say what the number is. And I'm like, well, then why roll it? I don't understand.
Yeah, why roll it? Why not just fiat it? Yeah. So
go
have you
ahead.
noticed, as you've been playing with one-to-one time, have there been times when people seem more engaged texting back and forth on the phone than things that they've done at the table?
Oh, sometimes.
That's been a surprise for me.
Right.
Is that people that tell me, because it's a more focused one-to-one thing with the DM too. You get the DM's full attention.
Right.
One of the reasons people give for not doing one-to-one time is, well, we don't meet very often. Our sessions are infrequent, so it's harder. And like, my experience was the opposite. I think one-to-one time is much easier when you don't meet every week, because it keeps people engaged in the world. It keeps them engaged in what's going on. It gives them little goals that their characters can do between sessions. And I've had some of the most fun just texting one guy where he's like, all right, I don't want the other players to know I'm doing this, but I'm going to sneak out and meet with those guys. And like,
interesting.
he ran into some were rats and had a whole thing go on. He got bit. He didn't know if he was infected. They told him, they took a chunk out of his ear. I had another guy running the were rats as a patron. And so I'm just texting back and forth with us. So like, we're not using our voices or bodies or faces or anything. And the guy was on the edge of his seat. He couldn't wait for the next message to come in and see what happened. Right.
Yeah.
And so when he comes in the next time to play, he's already brimming with stuff that happened that the other guys don't know about, that he gets to reveal to them if he wants to or not. I've seen some crazy PvP stuff go down using one-to-one time. I was in one game where one of the players, you know, they say don't ever end in the dungeon. Well, we had a session where that happened. It's, if you go on Trilopulus, it's called the Snail Shell of Your Desire. We'd gone into the dungeon and we'd killed a flail snail, but we didn't have a lot of men with us. So we were like, let's go back and get the shell, because the shell is valuable on those things, but we needed enough dudes to carry it out, right? So we get back there. It wasn't where we left it, and it was, it was in this closet, but it was on this raised dais. And one guy just ran up and just grabbed it and tried to haul it out, and it had a spell on it, and when he grabbed it, he got stuck to it. And then another guy tried to pull him off and got stuck to him. 3 people wound up getting stuck to this thing, like 2 players and a henchman. And then we got attacked, and it was a brutal fight. Because we got attacked,
stuck to this dais trying to
just
fight.
3 of them were. The rest of us are like, what are we gonna do? We started throwing things at it to try break off the piece that they were stuck to. We shattered part of the shell, so we ruined its value, and we still couldn't get them loose. And then just a horde of zombies attacked us. And we killed them, but like, it was a spell. It was the illusion one, phantom images or whatever. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
And so we didn't get any XP for killing them because they weren't real. They didn't drop any loot. And we realized we had to get out of there because the session was ending. And so we left 3 guys just stuck to this shell. And so we were like, okay, we go back to town. We buy as much water and food and supplies, and we're going to bring it back to them because they got to stay in that room, right? When we get back, no people, no shell, nothing. They're gone. So it's like, no way, right? So they showed up again later, and what nobody knew was that they were under the geas of the wizard that lived in the dungeon. He had
Mm.
totally turned them. He charmed them, and um, so we're playing, and
And they
my
come
my
back to
buddy,
like join your party, but they're like they're like trained. Okay.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So we wound up fighting them in the dungeon again. My buddy Dornall, one of his characters was one of the ones that got grabbed. He was playing his other character who was a thief. He snuck around behind and hid himself in the shadows, and we won the battle. We killed everybody but the one dude. The dude was running away, and he was like, I'm gonna backstab my other character. And his one character assassinated his other one that had turned bad.
Okay.
And it was like such a brilliant moment of role play. I've never
Mm.
seen anything like it. Where like one,
Mm.
he's like, this is one of my characters, is the other is my other character. He
Mm.
had more time in the one that went bad,
Yeah.
and he just jumped out and ganked him.
Mm.
And it was like, it was a win, but it was like, whoa,
Yeah.
the
It's a
kind of
it's
stuff that you just can't get when you have one party. The
mm.
joke we had for a while there when we were talking about mass battles and multiple players or multiple characters per player, we said, you guys are just mad that the end of The Hobbit was the battle of 5 armies and not the battle of 5 tieflings, right? Because that's kind of what it's supposed to be. Like Adventure
Mm.
Conquer King system is like this too, where you're supposed to start off as the small little dude, and you're supposed to build towards having a wizard tower
Mm.
or a castle
Sure.
or a thieves' den. You're supposed to build an army so that you can impose your will on the world and grab parts of it away. So, I've
Mm.
never played anything conventional. In a conventional game, it seems to me like your level 20 guy is just going to be going in the more dangerous
Sure.
dungeons, and he's still
Sure.
going to be grubbing around these diseased sewer dungeons, getting bigger monsters to kill and more treasure. But that's just
Sure.
what happens with his life.
At some point, it feels kind of like Diablo, and you're just jumping into a rift to
Yeah.
go get treasure, so that you can jump into a rift to go get treasure, so you
Yeah.
can, you know.
Yeah.
You
But the
mentioned.
point that you were
Oh
making
yeah.
about with your kids and connecting and how do you compete with video games,
Sorry.
that's one of the things that Bradford Walker points out too. He's like, conventional play is so similar to video games that it really can't compete because
Mm.
it takes like you got to get everyone together. It takes at least 4 hours, if not
Mm.
more, per session. And a video game is just waiting for you to turn on, play it when you want to turn it off.
Sure.
He's like,
Sure.
Baldur's Gate 3,
Mm.
very similar to playing 5th edition,
Right.
right?
You
So
have
what
to.
is it about RPGs? What can they do that nothing else can do? Why did they set the world on fire when they came out? And it's no video game can take away the reins like the way that we play Dungeons and Dragons, where you have complete player autonomy. They can go anywhere they want and do anything they want. And the DM is there more as a referee to keep the system running. But the DM doesn't have a predefined story. He doesn't know what they're going to do, what's going to happen. One of the skills that the BroSR emphasized, although not to the degree that it seems we've been kind of backed into the corner on it, is no prep.
Mm.
Jeff Rowe is not a no prep DM.
Okay.
He likes to prepare dungeons. He likes to prepare things going on in the world. So he's never said like you can't do any prep. But we did play with that stuff for a while because at the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide, you can roll up a dungeon on the spot if you need to. You can roll up wilderness hexes. You can explore them as they go. So the way that it's taught in first edition is if the players go somewhere you hadn't expected, here's your rules to make sure they can still have wilderness encounters and run into hills and mountains and forests and stuff, or in the dungeon. I used that running Blackworm of Brandonsford. My buddies, we were actually playing. It wasn't Dragonbane. It was Forbidden Lands.
You mentioned that
company,
one. Yeah, I was going to
yeah.
ask you about that. Like, because would you consider that a conventional game system?
I don't know. I really liked it. So I got 2 buddies I play with on Monday nights, friends from high school and earlier, just, living in that's how we keep in touch, is just Zoom meetings on Mondays. And so we started playing games. And I wasn't even running it. My buddy Andy was running Forbidden Lands, and it was a hex crawl, and it did not feel conventional. It felt really open, and he's always been a sandboxy DM anyway. But he was like, you know what? I want to play tonight, but I don't have it in me to DM. Can you run something? And so I ran Puzzle Dungeon, and in that one, there's there's an artifact that if you put the lens in the thing and you point it at a magic tapestry and you look through it, you get teleported into another world. And sure enough, that's what happened. And so I was like, oh crap, what do I do? So I grabbed Blackworm or Brandonsford, and so I'm like, all right, you guys are in this one. So I ran that adventure. Well, there's a mine, a collapsed mine in that is just basically a set dressing. Like there's all the beams are down and there's a dead dwarf in there if you dig far enough. Well, I was describing the mound and I was describing the what I thought would probably be there for a mine, like oxygen shafts and stuff like that. And they got super interested and they had equipment and they started excavating it and they got past the blockage and they wanted to go into the mine. And there was nothing in the module. So I just grabbed Appendix A and started rolling up a dungeon as we went. And the very first room where they encountered creatures, what did I roll up but a bunch of dwarves? So it was perfect. It just fit. And they didn't realize if the more they wanted to explore that mine, I could have gone months with just rolling it up as we go.
Right.
That's something that a game can't do yet. Right now, a video game can't let them decide what's important. I mean, maybe some can. Like you could say, well, Minecraft, if you don't, if you don't go creative mode, if you go on survival, then it's just open and sandboxy. But
there's still an aspect of video games that is just wildly missing that used to be there, and that is the social aspect of it. Like you have this
give and take, the improv, the yes and, where you connect, make an eye contact with another person. You're both fully engaging your imaginations.
Right. But as on top of that, let's pay attention to what each other is doing. And you can get that still like in fighting games, like you in fact have to sort of pay attention to what your opponent is doing. But like the couch co-op games like Champions of Norath, there was an aspect of like, how are you building your character? So I build my character different. Like you don't really need to do that in a lot of in the Roblox and the Minecraft. There's aspects of the game where it's like you're playing your own game and I'm playing my own game, and every so often we're just checking back with each other. I'm gonna go get Lollapalooza or whatever, and you go do your thing. Oh, you found a wither. Okay, cool. Have fun. But it's a very different experience.
It's parallel play. It's not cooperative.
Yes. It's not even close. So it's like last session we have this, this demonic portal that comes out of this dark forest, right? And my players are going to try and interact with it to rescue a different adventuring party. And I had created a different adventuring party that basically is essentially in trouble there. And one of the members is trying to be, the demons are trying to capture one of the members. And so the other 3 members of the adventure party are like dying, trying to save them. And my players come in with like we're going to help, right? And about 2 minutes in, we're putting our lives on the line for this other adventuring party that we barely know anything about, just because we see them being heroic. It comes to the point where it's like, it's down to like single rolls. And I'm going, okay, I'm rolling a D8. And if I roll a 6, 7, or 8, this character dies because they've got shifted 6 meters off a cliff, and it's 100 something feet down. And so people are like, just watching beta. I'm like, you don't get that in The Witcher 3. You don't get that.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, even the most exciting video game I have ever played does not get 6 people going, what's going to happen right now? And then I go, roll the 5. He's right at the edge. His axe drags to the edge of the concrete. He grabs on, And I'm like, and now you see the demon that just tried to throw you over there, and he's running back towards the portal. And it's so engrossing. And so but it's something it's not. I thought about it like a couple like weeks ago or something, and I'm like, there's a difference between imagination, and I go into my brain and I picture Aragorn, and now he's there, and Liv Tyler's there, and I make this thing, as opposed to what Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs are, which is more like dreaming. It's more like an imaginative scenario that you're responding to as opposed to creating. Because when you get those other 6 players and one of them says, "Oh yeah, I'm totally going to copy myself," and you're like, "What? I didn't. What? Oh, you cop? Oh no!" And it's like, I don't. Now there's 2 of you. And you have to. That's kind of the reason I'm doing this. Like I want parents to do this with their kids. I want people picking up Mouse Ritter, and then at some point finding your channel so they can actually learn how to do it the right way. Because as much as I've resisted the idea of the Braunstein, the one-to-one timing, the BroSR method, despite playing Dragonbane, I'm basically doing what you guys are suggesting to do, because again, resistant going into it, slowly stepping my way, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is way more fun.
Well, once you start implementing the tools, they start having the desired effect, and it opens things up that you get excited about. And you're like, oh, I want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes. I want to know what all is possible.
Right.
So, and yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be my thing forever. I might find something else. That's the other thing about the BroSR is, like, on Twitter, there's so much backbiting. There's so much argument. You state anything, and there's so many people that come out and tell you 5 reasons why you can't do that because someone was mean to them 4 years ago. But when you're in it, the overwhelming ethos is one of experimentation and, like, just this giddy joy where we are playing with stuff that either it was the original deep magic from long ago, or we may have even gone past what the creators did in pursuing the tracks that they were on. As far as, like, this Bronstein stuff, I had an episode last night where people used BroSR, which was the basically it's a few essays about the Bronstein style of play from the BroSR perspective, and it's a bunch of ready-made factions that you can run and a setting map where you can, if you want to use theirs, you can use their factions, their setting, and run your own Bronstein event. And there's even a mini one built in. If you don't have a bunch of guys, you just want to do the caveman faction, there's a caveman Bronstein you can run. But the group that played it first, well, I don't know, there was another guys that beat him to the punch, but the groups that ran a big one, they used Amber diceless rules. What is that? Throwing. Let me grab it for you.
You said Amber diceless rules?
Amber diceless, yeah. So, Appendix N author Roger Zelazny has a series called Chronicles of Amber, and this is the role-playing game that came out years ago, and it is, you start off when you're creating your characters, everyone, like, bids on how many points they want in your main stats. You know, like,
so it's like
magic,
like a point buy system, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Let me see if I can figure out. I don't remember it exactly because I was doing a bunch of stuff at the same time. There's psych, strength, endurance, and warfare are the 4 attributes. And basically, everyone gets a certain amount of points, and you do this secret auction where everyone tries to say, "Here's how many I want," and then the whoever wins gets the highest in that score. And so, when people run into each other, the DM just has to compare, like, what is the type of fight that they're doing, what's the key attribute, and whoever's higher wins.
Okay.
So it's just, there's not much randomness in it, except you don't know what the other people's stats are until they start testing each other, right? So he was like, let's run the Amber, he called it the BroSR diceless. So we were using Amber diceless rules, and we were using the setting of BroSR, and yeah, we were up till like midnight talking about that. It was a 3-hour episode, so I don't know if anyone's ever going to listen to it. If they're going to look at it and be like, "Oh, 3 hours now." But if you're driving somewhere or whatever, you're doing some spreadsheeting at work, you can put it on double speed if you want. The stories that came out of that one were hilarious, and just when you have a bunch of guys playing a game together, trying to convince and sucker each other, and trying to betray and backstab, and it is just. It's hilarious fun, and I've not played anything like it. That conventional play PvP is looked on with horror.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In conventional play, PvP is the one guy who's out for himself, stealing items or objects from the rest of the party,
right? Or
picking fights that nobody wants to engage with, or things like that. Whereas in first edition, it's like part of playing your role, like. The thief, everyone says, well, you know, the thief is underpowered. It's like the thief should be leveling up faster than everyone else because he should be taking a little skim off the pot when the treasure's found, right?
Right.
You know? So it's kind of like that. It's not like we're trying to kill each other all the time, but it's like that idea, like, how far can I trust this guy? How much do I have to hold him at arm's length? Kind of thing.
I suppose there are some aspects of that type of play, like, I'm trying to think of how to explain that. if you have a session that turns into something of PvP and you come out of it and you're not mad at that person, something went well. Like something happened, right? Like because if you
But you know
have
what?
that.
It happens though. Like
Oh, really
people
quick. Yep.
rage quit.
Do they? Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like out of the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
So Bronstein wasn't working for us the way that we were doing it. The
Mm.
always on game, like the Brovenloft,
Mhm.
that ate that DM. He did a great job, but by
Mm.
the end he was like, I don't even want to think about D&D for a while. It was a
Wow.
month of just constant communication
Yeah.
and adjudication and stuff. There was another one that was Broriental Adventures.
Okay.
And that ate that DM, and he quit the whole game. He was like, I can't keep up with this. I got, for my own health, I got to stop.
Wow.
So Jeff Rowe went back to the basics, and you should, whether you believe in the BroSR style or not, there's a movie you should watch, Griffith Morgan. It's Secrets of Blackmore, and it is a documentary that talks about the origins of D&D, and it doesn't focus on Gygax. It focuses on Arneson and what the Blackmore bunch were doing in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
And that's where the Bronstein comes from. Is a guy, Wesley, ran a Bronstein. It was supposed to be a war game, and the night he said, "This is the night before. We're going to run this new type of game. Instead of everyone getting an army, you're each getting one character. You're in this college town. It's the eve of war." And everyone just one by one come in and tell me what your guys doing. And like, of course, in the waiting room, they all started hatching schemes and stuff, and that's where the magic came from. And a lot of people think that led to the creation of Dungeons and Dragons, because Blackmore was a Bronstein. It was a medieval Bronstein, and that's what Arneson played with Rob Kuntz and Gary Gygax, and we were off to the races. Right, so definitely watch that. Jeffro went back and watched that and said, you know what? The original Bronstein wasn't this month-long event. The original Bronstein, Brownstein is what they call it.
Yeah.
It was a party game. It was one night. And so Jeffro said, you know, we've been trying this, but we're missing something. It's eating DMs. It's running these campaigns into the ground. What if we got back to the one session? And he called it the Battle Bronstein. And so he took what had been going on in Trollopolis at the time, and he split it out with the main major bad guy players and some of the good guys. And we just all met in a Discord one night. He handed out the toys. You know, I got to be put in charge of the giants. We were like the main bad guys of the thing. And we just had it out. And over the course of the night, it didn't look like something was going to happen until all of a sudden there was this convergence where everything came around together. Something called the Red Kegger. And my giants came out thinking they were going to party, and they got attacked. And then Macho Mandolf's two blue dragons fly over the treetop, and one of them casts mirror image on itself. So now there's 4. You know, it was just crazy. It was craziness. Yeah. But before that, there was a thing that I got to be a part of with Jeffro that kind of I felt like was a seminal event. So my character was a guy named Foam the Gnome. He was a level 1 illusionist thief. You know, gnomes can dual class. And I made good friends with a half orc that was another player who was the one that actually wound up grabbing that snail shell.
Okay.
And we were both the thieves, and so he left me. He had a harem of women that were into, it was, what did we call it? The orc racial criticism group or something like that. It was like ORC, and it was like a bunch of like these protester women that were like just following him around and trying to live orcish lives, just being all slovenly and stuff. And so he left them all to my gnome. So it was kind of like a reverse Snow White when I was out there in the woods in my little gnome hideout. And I had all these princesses who were just like filthy and dirty because they were orcish. They were humans, but they fancied themselves orcish.
Okay.
And he was like trying to take care of all of them and do the dishes and stuff like that. But he was sad because his friends had to be left in the dungeon and they were gone. So when they showed up again, I played it like Foam was so happy to see them, he didn't realize that they'd changed. So he didn't know they were bad guys. He was just happy to see them again. Right? Pewter was the guy that wound up getting killed by his own player. Right. And Garamond was the name of the half-orc. Well, Jeffro had gone to a convention and said, hey, do you guys want to play original first edition Dungeons and Dragons? And so he had a face-to-face group. So he had us online on one night. He had a face-to-face group, and then one of the guys from the face-to-face group wanted to play online with us. And so this was the first time it started getting PvP-ish because Jeffro told him they had had their adventure and they got these 2 blue dragon eggs. And Jeffro said, the other players are not going to let you keep those. They're coming for them. So he was already on edge. He didn't know who it was. And he's pumping me for information in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeffro was texting me saying, all right, the 2 guys that came back, they want to get those eggs. What are you going to do? And so he set up this thing with the guy. You know, he's like, we're in this tower, you know, the wizard's gone, but we're defending it. We got these 2 dragon eggs. They've been casting haste on the dragon eggs to try and make them hatch sooner because they wanted them to imprint on them and they wanted to train them and they wanted to have 2 blue dragons. And I was like, well, you know, I'm a thief. You know, he's like, people are going to steal these. I was like, I could come and I could check the place out for vulnerabilities and give you some advice and all of that stuff, you know. And he's like, all right. And he's like, oh, and we happen to find a scroll that we can't use. It's an illusionist scroll, not a magic user scroll. Because in First E, it's 2 different languages. Magic for wizards is different than magic for illusionists.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna come take possession of the scroll, and I will I'll look around for you and see if I see any signs that somebody's plotting something, right? And so then I'm just making friends with the guy and earning his trust, like in real life. Like I was starting to feel bad about it because I was like, what is going on right now, you know? So Jeff was like, what are you going to do? And I was like, all right, when we get there and I'm looking around, I'm going to start casting Phantasmal Forces because that was the spell I knew at first level. And I was like, the room with the eggs is going to fill with mist. And then they're going to see the eggs one by one raise up out of the mist as if something invisible is carrying them, jump out the window and feather fall. At the same time, I had the women protesting about orc rights, and I had 2 of them run to the base of the tower with baskets. They were going to catch the eggs. They were going to run back into the protest. All the women were going to swirl around and run in different directions. All the women were going to have covered baskets. So you didn't know which one had the eggs, right?
Okay.
But that was all part of the Phantasmal Force. The eggs weren't actually moving. One of the 3rd guy, the henchman that got stuck on the shell, was the henchman of this guy. His name was Gold. Well, he was playing a female elf named Goldenrod, and he just saw him and took him back in because he was like, "Oh, it's henchman." So I had a man on the inside. So I'm texting Jeffro all this stuff. So here's what happens next. When everyone's looking out the window and trying to worry about what's going on, my servant on the inside will grab the dragon eggs and hold them out the opposite window. And my gnome had there was in an earlier adventure there was a menagerie of Belboz the Magnificent, who's this evil wizard. And I had released a room full of burrow owls that were all like 7 feet tall. I said, if I release you, your strongest one must pledge his service to me. So they agreed to it. You know, gnomes speak the language of burrowing animals, so I can make myself understood. So I picked the lock, let him out, and I had an owl that like big enough for my little gnome to fly around on. So I was like, all right, Lenny, that's his name. I was like, bring your family. Everyone picks up the eggs and flies off, and that's how we'll get the eggs out of there.
So so while you're doing this, there's another party of people who's playing against you, trying to get the eggs.
This is before that even happens. This is me just writing up.
You just writing
steps.
out what you're gonna do. Okay. So then
Jeffro. So I give this to Jeffro, and here's the thing about BroSR that's different than as a player than conventional, is you have to hold your character with an open hand at times, and say, you know what, I may lose this guy. This is my favorite character I've ever played.
Right.
I may lose him, and it might not be my fault. So that's what I had to do. Is I said, all right, Jeffro, here's the plan. And so I had to make a plan ahead of time that was going to survive contact with a group of 6 players in the moment. Right?
Jeffro's going to be playing as your character, making some choices for you.
I'm telling him what my guy's going to do, and he's going to run him. He's going to be running him. And like the easiest thing for them to just stick a sword in him and be done with, right?
Right.
But the guy doesn't know if he can trust me or not. So it goes almost according to plan. Except the henchman gets cold feet because he doesn't ever get a moment where he could grab the eggs. Right? And then Goldenrod actually shot one of the 2 women as they were running because he saw the eggs floating down and he saw these women and he didn't know what to do and he just shot her, killed her.
Okay.
right? So the illusion goes off. They grabbed my guy, but they didn't strike him. They didn't do a single hit point of damage. So it didn't break the illusion spell that he was weaving.
Okay.
They freaked out. Jeffro said that like they realized that they were in a harebrained player scheme and they didn't know what to do. He said it was very engaging because they were expecting a bunch of giants to come kick in the door and try to steal the eggs. So they were like ready to fight. And then when it filled with smoke, he said it was panic. So Jeffro's like, it didn't work. Here's what happened. They, escorted you out by the scruff of your neck. And I was like, yeah, but do I still have the scroll? And he was like, oh yeah, they didn't take that back from you. And so the scroll was actually a scroll of suggestion. And so I was like, I think I can still save this and get those eggs. And so I went to, because after all the shot and the chaos, all the women got arrested, and the guard filled the tower. So it was like no chance for my guy to get the eggs out. So I said, all right, I want to go to the captain of the guard. And I used, as I was explaining what I saw, I started reading off the scroll of suggestion, which that was hard to do to burn that because I could have kept it and wrote it down in my spell book and had it from then on. But I was like, I need to use it. And the spell worked. And so what I basically told him was Goldenrod is, he's a murderer. You need to arrest him for killing the gal. But what I told him was he is obsessed with those eggs and he's going to try to take them from you. And you need to do something to protect them. And I intimated that he should have, that the eggs that were left were not the real ones, that there was something wrong and dangerous with them, that his men should put them in a chest, an iron chest without touching them, and go bury them in the forest. And so it goes off. They were freaking out because they saw the eggs go out the window and then they looked and they were still there. So they didn't know if I'd stolen the real eggs or if they'd been replaced or whatever.
Sure.
So I just told the two henchmen that had been, or not the henchmen, but I told Pewter and Garamond, I told Pewter, you need to go to the jail cell and witness against Goldenrod, and you need to try and get the women out if you can. And I told Garamond, hide in the shadows, wait until they bury this box with the eggs in it, and then once they leave, you can go dig it up, and then you can bring it to your master. Because Belbaw's one of the eggs. So it was like this crazy PvP thing where the online players were playing against the in-person players, and everyone was engaged. But the ultimate result was Jeffro, he had a Goldenrod get arrested. He was in jail, and he was going to have a court trial, and all of the in-person players were going to be the jury. Is Goldenrod innocent or not? Because the way it looked like there was an inside man, and like Foam the Gnome hightailed it out of town, left to another one. So the problem was the one-to-one time, the downtime requests.
Why?
The guy didn't want to wait for the next session where his party was going to try to bust him out of jail.
Okay.
And he kept trying to solve it by commands that he was giving directly to Jeffro. And Jeffro was like, no, this is too fun. We want to do it in session. And he kept hitting brick walls. And then the other players picked up on it. He said he was going to... So B-Dubs was running a Chaz the Elf. And he was like, oh, there's an elven, sister locked up. These humans are going to pay. And he's like, I'll send foxes to communicate with you. And then one of the guys saw it and was like, I'm going to hunt foxes to try and win the young maiden's hand, and all this stupid stuff.
I get you.
And that's when Goldenrod got messed up. And he was like, he flamed out in the Discord. He announced that his character committed suicide in jail. And then he left.
Wait, why? Like, that's pretty extreme. Like, that's just because he couldn't do what he wanted to do right then?
He kept bumping into a brick wall with trying to do it in downtime, and he just didn't have the patience to wait for the session, and he just flamed out. The guy that was playing Elric, that when he got struck by lightning and then hit with the mosquito storm and then killed by the caveman, he pieced out. He raged out of the game, right? So the thing about playing this way is that people get really invested. And like in my episode last night, I had a guy who admitted that one thing happened that really upset him and he had to master himself to stay in the game. I did that to another one as a player in the Amber. It was another Amber game. It was the Braunless Dice Stein, where I tried to meme something into reality that totally wrecked another guy's plan, and he had a hard time with it. So like this happens from time to time. I don't know how you avoid it.
I feel like it's really... I think maybe you shouldn't. As you were talking, there's something that occurred to me. As a dungeon master, when you're playing with your players, there's a tendency to lean in one of a couple different directions, like antagonistic dungeon masters who suck and the players don't like them, and then kind of favoring dungeon masters who also kind of suck because they're babying their players. Like one of them is faking dice rolls in favor of their players,
Yeah.
and one of them is faking dice rolls against their players. And there's a
Yeah.
little middle area, but it's hard to stay in that middle area. And so as you were talking, I was like, wow, this actually is kind of the perfect solution so that you don't have one of those two leanings as a dungeon master, because you're kind of a little bit detached. You go,
Yeah.
hey, person running my Muppet vampire, what does the Muppet vampire say when the players do this? And the Muppet vampire says, I don't say anything. I actually cast lightning bolt. And you go, whoa, okay, well, that's, but you can do that and just go, sorry, they didn't talk to you. The Muppet vampire just cast lightning bolt at you. And you can now allow, but you also mentioned another thing that was like, players come up with weird crap. Like dungeon masters sometimes have a hard time coming up with the weird crap because they live in this space a little bit too much and they're kind of being heady in the world or whatever. But a player encountering world things will go, yeah, I guess I would cast a spell while reaching into a mirror and my other hand's in the bag and I'm trying to tether the thing. And like they're connecting 17 different things together because they go micro instead of macro. Yeah. And so they're going to come up with a weird, like, I'm going to cast illusion with dragon eggs running around. And I'm like, that's actually a really interesting solution to dungeon master, not necessarily just burnout, but dungeon master giving the wrong version of DM to the players. So something in what you were highlighting, and like I get the point where, it can feel bad when Stacy is playing against Dylan and Stacy and Dylan go, fine, one of us is going to peace out. But
especially when you put Fog of War in there and you don't know what happened. Like the DM maybe played it completely straight and it was fair, but because you don't know what all happened,
right? You're just being
you
told
might think,
that,
oh, you're cheating. You're just, you're being a
you're picking
weirdo.
You're picking favorites.
And that's the thing about Jeffro that's very unusual about him as a dungeon master is he will watch your character die and he will laugh about it. Not because he was trying to kill it, but because the characters in the world deserve to have good representation. And he is not committed to any storyline playing out. He is just as much an observer going, what's going to happen next? Right? So it's not like he's laughing because it hurt your feelings, but he's just like, whoa, I can't believe that happened. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And if you as a player can get to the point where your character dies and it's not the end of the game, and especially if it's hilarious and you can laugh at it too, it's just an entirely different species of the role-playing game than what I was used to from before. Because before, the characters are so important, and when they die, you're gonna have this big emotional moment mourning them, and even the most heartless DM will find it hard not to subconsciously be pulling for them to win.
Right,
because they are the main characters, right?
And so, they're also your social group for the game. There is an external element of partiality that goes, I know there's the potential for this thing unraveling if I disconnect the piece that's tethering you to it, and there's the potential for you not to show up next week. It might not be the way that people play, and it's probably not something you have to but as you're describing it, I'm going, there is some best about this. I don't know that I would necessarily run it in my own game, but I can see a lot of potential there. Like there's a part of me that's like, are you free on Tuesdays? You know what I mean? Like you want to I'd be interested to run a Bronstein game in this in first edition. Like that'd be actually, I realize I'm probably wow, I kept you here for like 2.5 hours or so.
I've done it to my guests as well, so don't worry about it. I had it coming.
I wanted to let you go on about your day, but first I wanted to talk to you. Let me bring up the screen share real quick so you can see what I am seeing.
Alrighty.
So you should.
And while you're doing that, I do just want to point out, like, the 1-to-1 time thing can help your characters get there.
How so?
If you get used to your character being in time jail and now you have to roll up another one, now you've got more than one thing going on in the world.
Right.
And you get used to not all of your eggs in one basket. So if one character dies, especially if they die in a hilarious way, you're not out. You're not. It's not like the Chick tract where Dead Leaf is dead. You know what I mean, or Dark Leaf or whatever, right? So it kind of prepares them for the moments. And then when a character dies, especially if it's stupid, it lets them know, hey, I need to be a better player. I need to think about things before I rush in because
Mm.
we spend so much time wondering how can we make DMs better? How much time is spent? How do I get better players? How do I get better as a
Mm.
player at this game? And if you're fudging and if you're making them guess what's in your head, they're never going to get better at the game. They're just going to
Yeah.
get better at you,
Mm.
right?
That's a really good point. I made a video a little while back asking um, the people who respond in comments, like, what are the metrics for a good player? Like how does one become a good player? And
Yeah.
generally I'll go through like on a live stream and go through the comments and try and summarize what I'm reading into some way. And one of the more important or distinct points that I came to, this was just by people's responses, was that if you aim in the direction of being a better player, in actuality, you'll be aiming in the direction of being a better person. Because a better
Yeah.
player is the person who's bringing snacks. They're paying attention to the table who hasn't talked
Yeah.
recently. They're going, hey, so-and-so, what do you think we should do? Like, they're making sure that the dungeon master says what their stars and wishes are or whatever. Like, they're going to try and be engaging in a proper social way. And you're right. So if you're the dungeon master and you are just going, who cares what we roll, you're diminishing your player's ability to become better people by baiting them in some ways. And
you're just there to tell them a story, and they get to play with part of it.
right,
And the only
right.
time they get their taste of autonomy is when you say, "How do you want to do this?" When they kill something, and you get to be gross for a minute about how much blood.
It's a telltale game, right? It's
Yeah.
Well,
And
let's choose your own
like
adventure. Not really. Yeah.
the height that I was told, hey, this is the best critical role was Brennan Lee Mulligan, and he was taking on the role of this dark god, telling a paladin about how he screwed up, and he was like ripping his face off, and he kept bringing him back from the dead. Everyone was like, isn't that amazing? And I'm like, I'm watching a bunch of people that aren't playing just wait for him to be done chewing the scenery. Right? Like if this was a video game, they would be tapping the X button as hard as they could to skip the cutscene.
Skip, yeah. Right.
So
I
I see what you got up.
Yeah,
it looks like my
this is so
info.
I was looking at this last night and a few things came to mind as I was going through this. It's like, okay, this is obviously made by a big fan, because with the page numbers and the color coding, like you essentially have made what I would consider to be like a tutorial for creating your character.
Yes.
Which means that in actuality, you conceived that it might be difficult for a new player to come to this thing and make a new character, and you wanted to ease that step in. If I'm off track on all, you correct me, but I got the sense that this is you're a big fan of this system. So this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, but you recognize that it's hard to do this thing. So you came in and you made this kind of color-coded document and made a thing that basically walks someone through the process of creating their character step by step, and then also explaining some of the reasons why you do a thing or why you would want to do a thing. I found this to be very interesting, and my follow-up thought too, I guess if anyone's interested in learning first edition Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, they should definitely take a look at this sheet, and when we're done with this live stream, I'll put a link to it down below. It's on DriveThruRPG. But my follow-up question, because I actually clicked on your profile on DriveThruRPG, and you have nothing else that you've made. So and I remember that you mentioned you don't have to get anything aside from the 3 books: the Dungeon Master Guide, the Player Handbook, and then what was the last one?
The Monster Manual.
Monster Manual. So you mentioned you don't have to get anything else, and it's staying as a loyalist to your own ideas. I guess it makes sense to not make a bunch of companions or modules or like stories or whatever. But you seem to have a pretty good skill of tutorializing something complex. Well, why wouldn't you make for example, like Awakening of Willoughby Hall for AD&D?
That's a good question. So first of all, I made this because I needed this. And
it's good
the
service
first
to someone
person
else
that
too,
I thank in the middle column is Drew Bay, because he made something better than this.
Okay.
I put on Twitter that playing in Trolopulus was on my bucket list as a gamer. And Jeffro saw it and then Macho Mandolf reached out to me and invited me to the Discord, and that's how it used to be on Twitter. They had to set up a Discord because Jeffro got kicked off of Twitter.
How come?
He said, I think the quote is, and please don't cancel me for saying this.
You're
He
quoting
said-
someone else. I get it. Yeah. Okay.
He said, "High fantasy is dumb." So sorry if that just got your channel demonetized, but that was what he said, and they kicked him off Twitter for a while. So we started a Discord, and that's how we've been playing. But before this, it was on Twitter.
When we're talking about high fantasy, we're talking about like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition fantasy.
Like Tolkien.
Oh, okay.
Like literary genre.
Okay.
So, I posted
I'm not sure
playing
I
in
agree
this
with
is
that,
on
but
my
I'm not
bucket
offended
list.
by it.
It seems like a very mild take. I don't understand why that was what did it, but whatever.
Okay, but so for whatever reason that got him kicked off of Twitter.
Yep. So he starts this Discord, and I get invited to play, and I am just like, I feel like probably the way that most viewers would have felt if they got called personally to come play on Critical Role. Because I have been reading Jeffro's session reports and just laughing out loud at the things that happen.
Yeah.
And now I get to play with my heroes and like probably weirded them all out that they actually had a fanboy show up because they're just a bunch of bros playing, right? What's going on? But it is very hard to roll up a character in first edition, and Gary puts obstacles in the way because, according to first edition, players should not read the Dungeon Master's Guide at all. And if you get wind that they did, then you should punish them by taking away some magical items from them.
Oh, okay.
It's like, whoa, what's going on there? But
it's considered like cheating or something.
He doesn't want to ruin the mystery. He doesn't want them to think about the rules and the hit points. He wants them to be in the moment or whatever. That's something I disagree with him on. I think all BroSR players should read all the rule books. But it's not straightforward how to roll up a character. You've got to jump back and forth between the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is off limits, right? And it's in different parts throughout. So Drew Bay had put together a document that not only did it have all the steps in order. My order's a little bit different than his because of the way that my brain works and how I do it, but his document actually had all the tables from the DMG so that you didn't have to ruin that by reading it for yourself.
Yeah, okay.
And I was like, I just want something that I can use as a bookmark that I can put in the front of my PHB. I don't have the space to recreate all the tables. I just want to create this little trifold brochure that makes it faster to, especially because it's a deadly game. It's not as, I'd argue it's not as deadly as OD&D or OSE or some of those ones, BX. Your characters are a little bit stronger, but you are going to find yourself having to roll up a new character, especially if you're playing one-to-one time and your guy is training for 2 weeks and he's in time jail.
Right.
So I was like, how do I make it faster and easier for my players?
I see.
And then I put a little dashed line on it so that people could fold it right.
Right.
So if you fold the right side over and line it up with that line, then you should be able to have a good.
Okay.
And then I put little jokes in it. I've got my, man, it feels good to be a bro. That's that was the first rap I did, appreciating the BroSR, and the other one, back at it like I'm using magic. I just thought this is going to be something that I can use to help me make characters faster, but it still follows all the rules. And I thought, here's what I thought. And this is an idea I had last year, and I didn't do it then either. I thought October's coming. I'm trying to do this YouTube thing. Maybe I will review a bunch of Halloween one-shots, and maybe I'll do the drive-through RPG affiliate link thing, right? And so I'll review a one-shot. I'll put a link where they can buy the PDF, and then I'll get a little something to help the channel keep going, because I'm not monetized yet. I'm still under 500. Sure. And so I thought, well, I know this is useful. I can put it out here for, I think it's $3.99 and marked down. For the holidays, it's marked down to $1.99.
I noticed that.
And because on DriveThruRPG, if you publish with them first, you get a bigger percentage of your other affiliate stuff than if you just do affiliate. So I was like, I need to have something. This is handy. I reached out to Drew and I was like, hey man, I'm gonna sell something. Can I, use it? Can I base it on the stuff you did? Again, as I said, there's some things that are different order, but it's basically like a harder to use version of his because his had all the tables and stuff. And then I had Fluid the Druid read through it, and I had Macho Mandolf read through it because those guys know their first edition like no other. And they suggested some changes and updates and stuff, and that happened. So, and then I made two versions of it. One for Americans with our letter paper, and the other for A4 paper for Europeans.
Okay.
And so I threw it out there. So the short answer is I just wanted something to get my foot in the door and get that 8% on affiliate, but then I didn't wind up selling any or reviewing any modules either. All my stuff is live, so it was kind of a somewhat stymied attempt. I may do something down the road. So far the channel has just been cost. There's been no remuneration for it, but I have made about like $70 on this thing, so it's enough to pay for like a month or two of StreamYard.
Well, I'm guessing that your channel is doing something for building the community, even if it's not showing like some sort of financial or tangible.
Well,
Good.
I don't know how to do that without becoming a hypocrite either.
How so?
Because I'm like, if you follow these things that I've been having a blast with and sharing with others, you don't need to buy modules.
Mm-hmm.
And modules might force your brain down a railroady path, even if they're sandboxy, right? And BroSR came out and they didn't charge a penny for it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we want you to have fun. We are the hobby side. We are the clubhouse. And if we're heading in a different direction than the PDF merchants, and that's where they get tripped up, do I really want to subject myself to the same monetary forces that have ruined it for TSR, that have ruined it for WotC, that has ruined it for the OSR? So I don't know. I feel a little guilty. Part of me is just like, well, who cares? I want to make some money. So I may still do that with the whole module review thing. But I don't know how that works with the Dunder Moose brand, because modules are a little bit of selling out, kind of, if I'm being honest.
I understand.
So I called it, before I released this, I called it Dunder Sells Out. That was my video.
I understand the point you're making, and it comes from a place of aiming at humility. I recognize that thing in myself. Is generally why I don't ask people to like my videos. I don't say subscribe. I generally don't put up end screens unless I know that a video I'm making is directly connected to another one, or like it's finishing an idea. And some of that comes from like, look, I want people to be playing the games with their kids. I don't want them to be on YouTube for, what are we at? 3 hours and 40 minutes. You're like, hey, I want people to be playing games with their kids, and that's actually what I want. You know, I mean, if one of my videos helps them to figure a thing out, then great. But I don't want to trap them in this thing. At the same time, there is a thing, like, I should be saying, hit the like button if you like this, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's the thing too, is YouTube is also a game. Sure. And if you learn the rules to play that, if you learn the rules as written for YouTube,
right,
why wouldn't you play to win? Right. So
and the thing is, you are coming up against all the nonsense of the Jenny D's, and I'm not trying to pick on her specifically. Her green hair just brings her up like a poisonous tree frog in my mind. So I go there first, but you are coming up against the other people in the TTRPG space. And if, you know, and here's where I'll challenge you. If you really believe what you believe, that this is the best way, do the best job you can to promote it. And if you can make Awakening of Willoughby Hall, you know, there's something for AD&D that gets people in the door. For example, what if there was a way you could make this document into something playable? You know, go from a level 0 scrub to some kind of gameplay thing that walks you through this thing. Hey, you just killed your first bandit. Roll a dice. Okay, you're going to be putting some points in some stats or something, you know, like whatever. Oh, you want to go wizard, you know, like you could basically create a document like this that takes someone through the character process. I don't know.
I have thought about, like, have you played Mothership?
No, but I want to. My game store doesn't carry it, and I heard that it was out of print or something. So I got to try and find. At least at my game store, they couldn't get it, and I generally like to buy stuff from there.
The player. The character sheet is really interesting in that it is set up like a flow chart. So you fill it out and it tells you what to go to next and which attributes impact the next thing you need to fill out. And I thought, man, I wonder if you could do that with a first edition character sheet. I do think that is something I really prefer in modern role-playing games, is when you have an official character sheet and it is the rules for creating the character are set up in order to how your eye flows across the page.
Hmm.
I think that's very handy so that you don't have people asking questions and having to flip back and forth and figure it out as much. So I don't know, maybe there's something I could do with that. Who knows? I'm not opposed to making money. That sounds actually fun. And as you know, especially being a family man, like the time we spend on this is often taken away from them. Like usually I'm doing it at like 9 o'clock after everyone's in bed.
Sure.
But there is something awesome about going to bed with your wife at night instead of
Right.
creeping in after she's already asleep, trying not to wake her, you know?
Painting miniatures late at night. But there's an aspect of it like we'll probably have to save this for another time so this doesn't turn into a 4-hour stream, but I
should have you come on mine and we'll do part 2.
That'd be great. I'd love to. Because I have questions for you about like your church. Do you run games there? Have you thought about it? Like, I mean, like, is this something I'm trying to do on my end? Like, I just put in a message to one of the pastors at my church, and I'm like, I'd kind of like to start a family game ministry, you know, like where parents could show up and I could teach them how to run Mouse Ritter, you know, and just be like, here's it. Have you heard of the Secret of Nim? Have you seen Fievel Goes West? I mean, you're basically that, you know.
Did you read Redwall?
I actually just learned about Redwall like yesterday. I've never heard of it before, but like, people are like Redwall. Yeah. So anyways, not to press you in a direction that you're not comfortable in going, but my Discord community does that with me sometimes as well. And they're like, you ought to just hit the like button. You ought to stop being afraid of it. Stop being so worried about the perception that people are going to have that you're trying to go after this money. People like the content you're making. I looked at your channel. You have people who are in your streams. You got like 400 viewers on like 3-hour streams. You know what I mean? Like that's that
is unusual.
Yeah. So I'm like, I wouldn't be afraid of making some stuff. If people who follow the things you make like the things you're doing, give them a way to spend $5 on you. You know, do them that favor. Give them something of the content in your brain that they can take and they can own and they can collect it, right? And they can like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I understand there's obviously a benefit to being humble and trying to stay out of the proud, arrogant, like, you know, of course you guys are following me, dirt. You know what I mean? Like, no, but you go, hey, since you guys are interested in this thing, here is a module I made, a thing, you know, and maybe make it free. If you feel like making it free, make it free. Or pay what you want, you know? You do one of those pay what you want, you might be surprised.
Well, that's kind of what I did with this one because it's, you know, it's just 2 sheets.
Yeah.
If you look at the preview, it's the whole thing. So it's got the word, you know, preview across it, but you can still print it out and use it if you don't want to pay or you can or whatever. So, it's good advice, Nate. I'm going to try and take it to heart. And, and the next time we meet, I'll be rich.
I appreciate you spending a lot longer than 60 minutes.
This was a fun conversation. It did not feel like 3 hours. It's good hanging with you, man.
It's good hanging with you as well. I appreciated you taking time to do this with me, and I have learned about the BroSR more than I came into this discussion. You know, you've given me more information than I had. I appreciate all the backlog of stories there because I get the sense that what lies underneath this like lurking monstrosity that is the BroSR is actually a collection of people having good experiences playing tabletop RPGs and trying to make the space of gaming something that actually is inclusive. You know, not just wearing the branding name of inclusivity, which is sort of this guise for like, let's actually ostracize people. But I mean, you mentioned some of the ladies.
Diversity is skin deep.
There you go. That way. Yes, no, right. And at some point, if your diversity is merely skin deep, you're not actually interested in connecting with people who have differing opinions and views and whatever else. It's like, no, this is a space for people who look like me and sound like me and whatever else. So,
well, there's people that are not diverse. How about I put it that way?
Sure.
There's people that are not diverse, but they're also not interested in the only voices in the hobby being ones that are decrying the culture war, right? Like RPG Ben Shapiro or whatever you want to call it.
Sure. And I can understand
and so there are just Christian men that want to game together and they are finding each other. And
Right.
BroSR is one of the places where that's happening. And it's Catholics, it's Orthodox, it's Protestants, it's Mormons,
Sure.
but they have a certain way of looking at the world, and it informs the way that they look at their gaming.
Right.
And they have respect for the founders, and they want to take what they gave and play with that stuff instead of what we're left with. So
that can leave us something to go into next time, and I will think more on that. But I have the sense that, what was it you said that just carried on a train of thoughts? It kind of goes a little bit zeitgeist again, but I don't mean to lean into that word. But there is a spirit of this thing that is kind of, it is kind of antithetical to, like, there's this idea that's sort of postulated out in the tabletop RPG space that is, we want to include everyone, and they say it loudly. Like, we certainly want to include everybody. Like, I made a video with a couple guys on my Discord channel about a couple weeks ago, about this Elon Musk thing, right? And it was a really strange idea that kind of came up casually in the tabletop RPG space, where people were going, we want this thing to be inclusive, while at the same time saying, but not with Elon Musk. He's not welcome. Yeah.
Well, inclusivity means everyone but us.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well,
so there's a place for us now.
Right. And yeah, I agree.
And it's not toxic. It is masculine. But as I said, there's people taking these. There are females taking these ideas and revolutionizing their own game, and they don't need permission, and they don't need the door held for them. They can do it for themselves. Post your receipts, blog your receipts, and then nobody can argue with you.
That is exactly the point that we kind of came to talking about the Gary Gygax thing and whatever else. And that was, if ladies want to be playing this thing, who's stopping them? Right? Like what sort of chauvinist are you to think that the ladies need to have, like as you said, the door held for them in this thing? If they want to be playing OSR games, they're going to play them. Like, who are you to say they can't? Exactly. And who are you to say that they need you to put out a red carpet for them to do it? They'll figure it out, right? They're big girls. They can read books and stuff.
I think for both men and women, it's easier to have someone teach you from like joining the game and seeing how it's done than to just get the ideas thrown at you and say, how do I make this work? The difference between success and failure is the one that's going to be like, well, I'm going to give it a shot and see how it goes, versus I need every last thing spelled out for me before I'm willing to try it. There are theory crafters that all they want to do is talk about the game and they don't ever play it. And you will go around and around in circles with them until you realize on Twitter, these guys don't play. They just want to talk about how I think I should be playing. And if you're not in the arena getting your butt kicked, your opinion doesn't matter. Blog your receipts. Show your play reports. Tell us what happened when you tried this stuff, and then that matters. Assuming you know what's going to happen doesn't, because as we've been discovering, as we've been pulling these old rules out and using them, you cannot predict the third and fourth order effects of following them. You don't know the weird resonances and ripples that come out from playing it the way that it was meant to originally. So yeah. So everyone's got to rise to the challenge and try it for themselves. I was lucky. I got invited in. I've never had a bad experience with a bro. I wasn't made to feel small or little or dumb or whatever. They just put their wing over me and said, here's how it goes. Let me show you. Because I didn't come in saying, this is what I know. I know so much. Do it this way. I was like, what do you got? Teach me. Teach me, senpai.
I think that's the right approach to this. It doesn't mean you can't have your opinion about what you find to be best, especially experientially, but coming in with a desire to learn, that's sort of obvious about you just after talking with you for a couple hours. I don't know. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Right on, bro. Thanks for reaching out and inviting me on.
Oh, no problem at all. I appreciate this. Anyone who is in the chat right now, hanging out, if you're not already subscribed to Dunder Moose, please go do that now. Go take a look at his channel, see what sort of BroSR content he has, and if nothing else, to go over there and yell at him and tell him he's doing it the wrong way. you know.
Yeah, let me have it. I
Yeah,
need to be
hey,
corrected.
sometimes that kind of contention can build community, right? You know, you get
Iron
get a little
sharpens
bit.
iron.
Yeah, there you go. That's what Crafty Matt and Rodney tell me all the time. So, Dunder Moose, I'm going to end it there.
Okay.
I'm
I do
gonna.
have one
Yeah.
more
Oh
plug.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Please,
Tomorrow
please,
night,
please. Yeah.
I'm coming on Harmony Ginger's channel. She's got a show called The Random Table. It's 4 of us. It's me and Harmony and Scudder Mike and Night Danger. And we're going to be talking about one-to-one time.
Hmm.
So come and watch that on Harmony's channel and bring your spiciest takes for the chat. And we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. And if you have I don't know if you have an in for me later on, if you perceive that I would love to do more of these interactions, and if there are
Right on,
round
man.
tables I could be a part of, I'd enjoy that as well. So not to
Heck
invite
yeah.
myself into your gig, but I enjoy the back and forth. So
Right on, man.
yeah.
I'll spread it around the back channels. There's always Bronsteins looking for players and stuff on Twitter and stuff. So we'll get you plugged in.
All right, appreciate
sure.
it. Thank you. Chat, I'm going to end it there. I keep looking at the wrong camera stuff here. I'm going to end it there. And God bless you all. Thank you for hanging out and going back and forth. I'm sorry I didn't pay like hardly any attention to chat. We're just mostly focusing on this conversation here. But hopefully all keeping each other entertained. I will go back through and scroll and see if I missed anything direct and address that. So
We'll save it for the next one when you come on my show.
all right, yeah, sounds good. All right, I'm going to hit end stream there. All right.